Rain often proposes solutions that are themselves new types of problem. Before I met her, the idea of breaking into a person's home to resolve a situation would have seemed utter madness. Nowadays it felt merely inevitable. I let out a huge sigh and put my face in my hands. Heather. Hey, it's okay, Rain paused, and I could picture her pained smile in my mind's eye. Hey, she's probably fine. I just was thinking worst-case scenarios. Most likely this is all a misunderstanding. Maybe she left Sherrowford and didn't tell us, didn't want to be followed, and hey, I wouldn't blame her. Best thing for her really, start a better life elsewhere, without the cult and all that hanging over her. I sighed again, sat up straight, and gave Rain a deadpan stare. Breaking and entering. Yeah. Elucidate for me. Yeah, me too, hey. Twill added. You have got a plan for this, right? It'll be easy. No problems. Rain leaned back, getting comfortable in her chair. Her place is in one of the two old towers on Headley. Shared entranceway, so we can wait for somebody else to hold the door. Failing that, the lock should be easy to force, all you need's a screwdriver. Kimberly's own front door is pretty secluded, floor 14, number 62, last one in the row. Twill shrugged. What do you need me for then? 'Cause I dunno what's in there. Could be nothing, could be a man-eating tiger. I'd take Preem, but I don't want to leave Evelyn here alone without her. Rain gestured at me with her eyes. And I think Heather might kill me if I went by myself and got in trouble. I tooted. No, might about it. Twill crossed her arms and frowned. As long as this isn't gonna turn into a whole thing. I have got school tomorrow morning. Rain nodded. Lockpicks, not door smashing. It's an old cylinder lock, I'll have it open in a couple of minutes at most. I do the breaking, you do the entering. Twill growled, uncertain. I flinched. It had been a few weeks since I'd last heard that sound. She'd probably meant to grumble in thought, but the noise from Twill's throat came out low, resonant, bestial, not a human vocalization at all, let alone what one expected from a slender teenage girl. A thrill passed through me, suddenly aware of the exact distance between us. Then Twill puffed out a breath and shrugged, and she was all human again. Take Preem if you must, Evelyn said. She clacked over to us but didn't sit down, tossed an open packet of chocolate digestives onto the table and extracted one for herself. This is important. Find out what the necromancer is doing, or where she's gone. Today. Breaking and entering, Preem intoned. Twill jumped in her seat, startled, then frowned at the doll demon. Bloody hell. She's too quiet, I keep forgetting she's there. I am precisely as quiet as I wish, Preem said. Twill frowned at her, the suspicion of a canine for an unknown animal. Don't engage with her, Evelyn said. Not unless it's necessary. Evelyn shook her head and tapped her walking stick against her artificial leg, a dull thunk. I don't fancy running away if anything goes wrong, no. What's the time, getting on for 12? Twill asked. We gonna do this now? Whenever you're ready, Rain said. Wait. I held up a hand, feeling like I was the only sane person in the room. What if somebody sees you breaking in, and calls the police? Rain laughed gently. Heather, nobody's going to do that, trust me. Round Headley. In the towers. Twill squinted at me. I'm from Brinkwood and even I know that no bugger'll call the Rosers in Headley. Rosers? I echoed. Twill, you live in a rural village, you don't talk like that. Twill grimaced and scratched the back of her head. Twill's right. Wingate and Headley's the roughest council estate in Sherrowford, Rain said. The other tower's condemned, has been for ages. Police only go there in threes, or not at all. Our girl lives in a rough neighborhood. Yes, I gathered that part, I said. But are you certain nobody will call the police? Rain shrugged. 99%. Even I'd heard of Wingate and Headley before I moved to Sherrowford. One of those names that turned up in national crime statistics, television news pieces about knife crime and youth stabbings, a turbulent spot in the otherwise placid surface of Sherrowford's desultory attempts at regeneration. I didn't like the idea of Rain walking around a place like that, but she'd been there 3 times already and this time she'd be taking Twill. The pair of them together would probably be the most dangerous thing on that council estate. I distracted myself by grabbing a chocolate digestive, and focused on avoiding crumbs as I bit into the biscuit. Twill stood up and knocked back the rest of her tea. Evelyn eyed her for a moment, opened her mouth and closed it again, until Twill caught her staring and spread her arms in an exasperated shrug. I was going to ask how things have been with your mother, Evelyn snapped, averted her eyes, and added in a much gentler voice, professional curiosity. Weird, Twill said. Evelyn shot her an offended frown. I mean with my mum, not you asking that. Simmer down, geez. Evie's concerned for you, Twill, she cares, I said. We all do. She just has a funny way of showing it. Funny way? Evelyn muttered. We don't want to pry, I forged on, doing my best to ignore Evelyn's ire, though I almost flinched. But after what happened when your mother visited, well, we all hope your family life is going okay. Eh? Twill shrugged and glanced out of the window. Like I said, weird. Not much more weird than usual though. I mean she's still my mum, even if she's time-sharing her head, I guess. Nobody in the church will talk about it. I guess some of them are the same, yeah, got the God riding along upside their skulls. Most likely, Evelyn said, her voice tight. Twill stared out of the kitchen window, a moment too long for comfort, watching the leaden sky and the threat of rain, the wind plucking at the unkempt grass. For all my involvement with the supernatural, I couldn't even begin to imagine how Twill felt about her family, about the pseudo-religion she'd grown up with, or the crippled outsider they worshipped beneath the ruined church out in the woods. It was like the plot of a bad horror film, a cult in the wilds, a hidden secret, a young and vulnerable girl except Twill was anything but vulnerable. She knew all their secrets and she was still very much alive and untouched, and untouchable, as I'd seen so many times. What on earth could I say to show her I cared? They and their God didn't seem so bad now, not when compared to the Sherrowford cult or Evelyn's past. When Twill's mother, Christine Hopton the high priestess of the Brinkwood Church had visited Sherrowford to offer us their dubious help, she'd been sweet and personable, hadn't creeped me out at all until the moment I'd seen something moving behind her eyes. She was still herself, still a person, just hosting a guest in her mind. Perhaps to Twill it was normal. Or perhaps not. They won't do it to you, Evelyn said suddenly. Twill turned to look, eyebrows raised. I mean they won't, you're probably too dangerous for the CU, for your church's God. Twill puffed out her cheeks and flapped her coat. More werewolf advantage, huh? Cool. Dunno how I feel about that, really. You should feel safe, Evelyn grumbled, then picked out another biscuit, chewed on it for a moment before she continued. My offer still stands, and don't you forget it. You can stay here if you ever need to. You come here, to me, at the first sign of family trouble. There won't be any. Twill looked at the floor and shrugged. But yeah, thanks. Wouldn't mind hanging out over a Friday night sometime. Evelyn grunted and turned away. I gave Twill a covert thumbs up, but she only raised a confused eyebrow at me. We should crack on now if we want to get this done before dark, Rain said, and stood up. She stepped over to me and ruffled my hair, exploited the instinctive urge to close my eyes whenever she did that. Meanwhile, you better eat some proper breakfast, Heather. You haven't had anything since 6 last night. Go back to bed if you need, yeah. Don't wait up for us, we won't be long, it's probably nothing. And if it's not, what are you going to do? We find anything, we'll call. You'll be the first to know, I promise. I guess so. Rain kissed me on the forehead and then flipped my onesie hood over my hair as she skipped away, left me flustering and blushing as Twill guffawed at the pair of us. They didn't waste any time. Rain dragged on her leather jacket in the front room, and Twill began to boast that she could run her way to the old council estate faster than a bus could take them. Evelyn didn't show much interest, wandering back into her workshop without so much as a friendly goodbye to Twill, but I followed into the front room, hesitated, then gathered my courage and spoke up. I'm coming with you. Heather. Rain finished stashing something black and metallic back inside her jacket. I didn't have to guess what that was. She smiled and shook her head. You haven't eaten breakfast yet, come on. Then I'll take a cereal bar. I'm coming with you. Twill made an idiot noise. No offense, but Headley Council Estate might be a little like, out of your depth. I have been in much scarier places, thank you very much. Girl's got a point, Rain said. She sure has. Still, it's not the same, is it? Twill shrugged. It's not exactly transferable skills. You can't explode some tweaker chav with magic in broad daylight, you'll get in right bother. You can if you're good enough at it, Evelyn called from the kitchen. I'm coming with you, I repeated. No ifs or buts. No buts, huh? Speaking of which, I could always take you upstairs, Rain said, her voice dropping, dangerous and low. Leave you unable to walk straight for half an hour. Then you won't be coming with us, after coming with me. If she expected to defeat me with embarrassment and sexual innuendo, Rain was sorely mistaken. I felt a blush rise in my cheeks, to hear her talk to me that way in front of Twill, who was blinking at us in confusion, not sure if she was following, but I raised my chin at Rain. I had her in checkmate. But you want to get moving right away, don't you? I said lightly. If I hold out, it'll take you quite a while to render me incapable of standing up. Rain burst out laughing, boggling at me in surprise and raising her hands. All right, you got me. I'm just playing. Twill grimaced at us. Bloody hell, you too. Is this just an excuse to flirt? Hey, Evie. They do this all the time. Yes, Evelyn called back. It's obnoxious. I'm not flirting, I'm serious, I said. I'm coming with you. That's final. Rain opened her mouth, and began to half sigh, half laugh, but then she must have caught the resolve behind my eyes, the reason I was demanding this. She killed the laughter and tilted her head at me. Why? Either the flat's empty, or she's hiding in there. Anything else is unlikely, you're not going to miss anything important. Because I'm responsible. For? Rain asked. I wet my lips and sighed, had to think. The initial desire had been pure gut feeling, unpacking it was a challenge. Kimberly Kemp, I'm responsible for her. From what she said when we let her go, the cult was all she had in life. No family here, and a grinding, low-paying job. You've met her since, do you think that's accurate? Rain nodded slowly. Yeah, it is, I think. Then I destroyed what little support network she had. I'm responsible. Don't you remember the way she looked at me? I almost shivered with distaste at the memory. I was the one she pleaded with, I gave conditions, for her life. I'm responsible. I'd like to see her again, maybe talk to her, especially if she's scared of us, say I don't know. Something. Apologize, maybe. Apologize? Evelyn drawled from the doorway behind me. I'll think about it on the way there. Rain nodded, all trace of playful humor gone. Okay, sure, you're with us then. But find a cereal bar first, or 3. You need to eat. You sure about this? Twill looked very doubtful. Heather, I get what you mean, it's cool, poor girl's probably scared as shit, but it's really rough round Headley. Scary rough. I can handle that. In truth, I was barely considering where we were going. Rain shrugged. We'll all be together, it'll be fine. Headley's rough, but it's hardly Afghanistan. And there's probably nothing in that flat but moldy bread. It can't hurt. Rain fixed me with an intense look, a no questions do what I say look. As long as you stick to exactly what I tell you to, and stick with us, right by my side. Wander off alone and you'll have 14-year-olds trying to sell you drugs in 5 seconds, propositioning you in 10. Yes ma'am. I imitated the tone Rain used when I bossed her about, stood up straight and pulled a mock salute. She grinned, winked at me, and Twill rolled her eyes. Frankly, if we do find Kimberly, I added. It might be a little easier on her nerves if she sees me, instead of you two. Twill frowned, gesturing at herself. What's wrong with me? Rain, I get, she's a psycho, but me? Me? I sighed. Twill, she watched you dismantle her zombies with your bare hands. Well yeah, she did. That was her fault. I gave her a look. And that makes you less frightening how, exactly? Oh, alright, fine. Twill shrugged, doing a poor job of hiding her brief smile. I suspect she rather enjoyed the feeling of being big and scary whenever she wanted. She came up short, frowned, and looked me up and down. You are gonna change out of that cat onesie, right? That might scare our Poundland necromancer for a whole different reason. I huffed out a sigh and put my hands on my hips. Rain started laughing. Yes, Twill, I thought I'd wander down there in the onesie, really get the locals' attention. What do you think? Headley Council Estate, a truncated double crescent of squat brick flats between Wingate Road and the distant motorway embankment, laid out like crab pincers, lined with cramped windows, pockmarked with air conditioning outlets and little satellite TV dishes, scarred with the shadows of badly cleaned graffiti, its rot frozen by the cold unsettled me worse than I'd expected. Sherrowford was not in general a rough town. Every city has forgotten pits, neglected areas full of people who've fallen through the cracks, too poor and ground down to claw themselves out. I'd grown up in Reading, more sheltered than most due to my mental illness and teenage isolation, but even I, mousy little Heather who never went out on the weekends, knew the reputation of places like Southcote or Whitley among my peers. Even with Rain on my right and Twill on my left, as we walked up the long concrete pathway on the green, this place unnerved me. Not the same way as outside, otherworldly realms on the razor's edge of human comprehension, or being lost in the Sherrowford cult's pocket dimension, but a sensation more animal discomfort than fear. An itch between my shoulder blades. A tightness in my chest. A need to look everywhere all at once, but also make myself small and unremarkable. The green between the 2 rows of flats was covered in scraggly brown grass, not doing too well in the winter, scarred by tire marks from bikes and littered with empty cans and cigarette ends in any convenient corner, plus several desiccated dog turds, and more than 1 or 2 used condoms. Several half-dead trees struggled up from their potting gaps between concrete slabs. We passed a few people, teenagers and young adults dressed like teenagers, all greased hair and imitation jewelry, smoking cigarettes in the shelter between 2 of the blocks, glaring out at the world as if looking for a fight. Old women made entirely of boot leather. A trio of muscled, tattooed men hanging around on a corner, one of whom had a huge, stained dressing over one eye. Twice, brave souls offered to sell us smack, though I didn't know what that was, or rather, they offered it to Rain, who turned them down with a shake of the head and a "nah thanks mate." Once, a lad hooted something rude at us, trotting in our direction across the grass, and I'd struggled quite hard not to flinch. Twill glared at him, barely growling, and he made himself scarce. Terrifying god aliens from outside reality? Sure. Evil wizards and giant zombies? No problem. Urban decay? Perhaps I'd better stay home. Nothing was going to happen to us, not in the middle of the day, despite the low grumbling sky. 3 of us, in public, with Rain radiating such a frigid aura. Nothing was going to happen. A tiny, mad, dangerous part of me enjoyed this experience, but not for any sensible reasons. Rain and Twill were positively intimidating. None of it directed my way, of course. If they ganged up on me like this, I would probably pass out in mortified arousal. The feeling of being guarded, looked after, sandwiched between two of the most attractive women I'd ever known, either of whom could lift me off my feet, well, I stored those feelings away for later. Rain held her shoulders squared, chin up, hands in her pockets, an exaggerated casual swagger to her walk, as if we were exactly where we were supposed to be. I realized I'd never seen her put on this particular front before, a defensive wall, don't mess with me. Twill, on the other hand, had somehow descended a notch or two toward her wolf-like state, but without any physical changes, a dark glower in her eyes, a subliminal threat in her musculature, an animal roll to her shoulders. And then there was me, twitchy and nervous. Which tower is it? Left or right? Twill asked quietly, as the shadow of the council estate's crowning glory fell over us. The one on the left, Rain said, her tone deceptively casual. That's Gleaston Tower. Glasswick Tower's on the right, that's the condemned one. Wouldn't want to go in there for love nor money. She glanced down at me. You finished all those cereal bars, right? Warmed up a bit. I nodded, then cleared my throat, fighting the urge to stay small and silent, my face tucked down inside my new scarf. Yes, I ate them on the bus. I'm fine, I'm doing fine. A white lie. No matter. Not long till we get inside, Rain murmured. She pointed ahead and up and up, and up. You can see Kimberly's place from here, the corner flat on floor 14. Curtains are shut, but I swear that's a light. Bathroom window, maybe. See it? I tried to count the floors, to follow Rain's finger, but the pollution-stained concrete defeated my eyes. Living in Gleaston Tower sounded like my idea of hell. Twin concrete monoliths, the Headley Towers Gleaston and Glasswick sat at the point the low-rise flats stuttered out onto open ground. 30 floors each of thick concrete slab, once fashionable apartments, dingy windows and cacophonous graffiti, they tore at the sky's underbelly over Sherrowford's West End. They could be worse, at least to my sensibilities. Better the texture of aged concrete than the too clean surfaces of steel and glass such things would be built from these days. At least these had life, of a kind. Some of the higher flats in Gleaston Tower sported window boxes, sadly empty this time of year, or big houseplants visible behind the glass, a pleasing counterpoint to the grey exterior. One flat near the summit flew the cross of St. George from their window, and another to the Rams' head colours of Sherrowford Football Club. Glasswick, the condemned tower, looked awful. Every window up to the 10th story had been boarded, the wood damp and rotting from weather damage. The glass higher up had been smashed. Weeds sprouted in the cracks and lichen had colonized big patches of concrete, a building with a skin disease. The police had nailed a man-sized plastic notice in big bold letters to the boarding over the entranceway. Keep out, building condemned by order of Sherrowford Council, entry punishable by 500 fine, so on and so forth. The notice was caked with graffiti, and a board had been kicked in next to it, an entrance to the lightless interior. At least the local spirit life seemed unruffled by the state of the place. Pneumosomatic creatures treated Headley much the same as the rest of Sherrowford. A beefy thing like a gorilla made out of charred meat was busy climbing down the side of one of the towers, and a pack of wolfish ghoul-faced monsters lurked around the connecting alleyways, chased by and sometimes chasing a tentacled lurker with a trio of huge stalked eyes, which occasionally waved over the buildings. We crossed the junction of pathways that marked the boundary between low-rise and the tower blocks. I checked over my shoulder, as I had every couple of minutes since we'd stepped off the bus. I did a double-take and shuffled to a halt, pulling on Rain's sleeve. Rain. Rain, she's stopped, I hissed. Tenny stopped. Rain looked back, as if she had any hope of seeing our invisible fourth companion. Tenny had indeed stopped, right at the boundary between the towers and the rest of Headley Council Estate, with her deep-sea black eyes upturned to gaze at the top of the condemned tower. She kept putting one tarry black foot forward and withdrawing it again, hesitant and uncertain, her lithe, androgynous form slowly shifting as if adjusting her footing before a sleeping predator. Her tentacles waved slowly, tasting the air. After we'd returned from down south, Tenny had resumed her habit of following me to and from university, though only about half the time. She loved to explore everything we passed, fascinated by every little detail of the world: pavement, weeds, passing dogs, glass windows, campus carpet. If Lozzie had created her, I suppose she was indeed very young. Curious and innocent. As we'd left the house this morning, she'd ambled out of the garden to accompany us, and Rain had decided her presence was a good idea. Just in case. I don't know why, I said. She doesn't look comfortable with this. Twill stopped a few paces on, frowning hard. You're a weird tentacle thing. She gone all canary on us? Don't say that. She's not a canary. And she's not a thing. What's she doing? Rain asked softly. I shook my head. She's not blocked, there's no magical boundary here. She's just uncomfortable. Tenny. I raised my voice very slightly, but she didn't respond. Can you ask her what's wrong? Rain said. In public? I pulled a face. Here. Not like you'll be out of place, Twill laughed. I don't know. I felt hot under the collar, increasingly concerned, but unwilling to talk to the air in the middle of Headley Council Estate. Tenny just kept staring up at the tower. This might be important, Rain said. Please, Heather, for me. I glanced around, biting my lip and weighing my options. I didn't like this one bit, but Rain was right, and I suppose I could make it look like I was talking to her. I nodded, swallowed my pride, and walked back to Tenny. Rain stuck to me like glue and Twill trailed along, both of them looking suitably dangerous and performatively combative. Tenny. I said her name again, voice soft, as I reached out and concentrated on the act of touching one of her tentacles. The pneumosomatic flesh went right through my glove, but I caught the appendage in my hand, smooth and oddly warm, and I held her softly. Tenny, what's wrong? Why don't you want to come with us? Her reply came in that low, bubbling mud voice, in human words at first, filtered into comprehension in the back of my head. Too big, swallow me whole. The tower? I whispered, glancing up at the concrete spar. Big and dark and a big mouth to swallow me whole, she said, and I got the distinct impression she was talking to herself. We're not going to that one, I whispered to her. It's condemned, nobody goes there. We're going to the other one. Tenny, over there. I tried to point for her, show her the way with her own tentacle. She came around slowly, as if taking a risk by looking away from the condemned building. She doesn't like Glasswick? Rain asked. I shrugged. Don't blame her for that, SA shithole, Twill said. This doesn't make any sense, I said, mouth dry. Why would she react this way? You know why it was condemned, right? Twill asked. I shook my head. There was a triple murder up there, years and years ago, like 2003 or 2004 or something. Guy went door to door with a knife and stabbed anybody who answered, but it turned out he was actually killing people who'd got his wife addicted to heroin, plus a bystander. Straw that broke the camel's back, lots of people moved out after. Maybe she's picking up on bad vibes, bad history. Rain nodded. Bad vibes, perhaps. Bad vibes. Right. I couldn't keep the sarcasm out of my voice. We'll stay on our toes, Rain said, deadly serious. If she freaks out again, the smallest twitch, you call stop and we stop, no questions. Got it? I nodded. It'll have to do. Tenny seemed less agitated now. When I let go of her tentacle, she followed us once more, all the way up to the shared entranceway of Gleaston Tower. We stood around for a minute or two. Rain kept up a steam of chatter as we waited for a resident to open the door so we could tailgate in behind, but when none appeared, Rain casually palmed a screwdriver from inside her jacket. My nerves shot through the roof, butterflies in my stomach. This was it, we were on the cusp of doing something very illegal indeed. To my surprise, I was deeply excited. A small part of me screamed about how I was meant to be a good girl, a good citizen, and good people didn't break into tower blocks they didn't live in. I counted my blessings, and reminded myself I had committed murder. Not such a good girl anymore, and never innocent. Rain jammed the screwdriver into the gap between door and frame, blocking the action with her back. She jerked it up and down, then swung the door wide for Twill and I. We hurried inside, out of the winter cold and into the entranceway, all sticky laminated flooring and stippled plaster walls. Tenny crept in last, slipping inside as Rain let the door swing closed. Wide staircases led upward into the tower on our left and right. A bank of 4 lifts stood at the far end of the room, their call buttons glowing noxious green. Everything reeked of that unique damp concrete scent, with hint of wet dog and tobacco smoke. I wrinkled my nose, feeling delicate. Right, you've got a decision to make, Rain said, rubbing her hands together. Me? Unfortunately, yeah. She winced in apology. I forgot about this part. This place stinks, ugh, Twill grimaced. 'S not that bad. Bit of local color, Rain said, then caught my eye again. Kimberly's flat is 14 stories up. Twill and I can manage the stairs, I've done it before, but I don't want to force you into a long climb without warning you first. It's a long way up, your legs are gonna get tired. Why can't we take the lifts? We can, but they all stink of piss. Rain shrugged. There is a third option, Rain said. I detected the hint of a smirk. I could carry you most of the way up. I sighed and closed my eyes for a moment. Rain was being completely serious. While I do adore your efforts to spare me life's little indignities, I am a big girl and I can hold my nose for 2 minutes. We'll take the lift. Rain laughed softly and nodded. Right you are then. Twill pulled another grimace. Wouldn't even touch the call button if I was you. See you two up there, then. Hey, you wanna have a race? I reckon I can beat the lift. She broke into a toothy smile and bounced on the spot, limbering up. 14 stories. Rain almost purred, low and mocking. No way. Not even you, lassie. Sure I can. Cece. Twill winked at her, then at me. What do you think, Heather? I think this neither the time nor place, I muttered, covering for how attractive I found this sudden competitive clash. You're on, Rain said. Loser buys lunch. Freak-winigo. Twill barked, laughed, and sprinted off in a dead run straight up the stairs, coat flapping behind her, feet slapping against the concrete steps. I swear I heard her bounce off a wall, an animal grunt of effort echoing down the stairwell. Knock knock knock. No answer. Rain rapped her knuckles against the front door of number 62, Gleaston Tower, Kimberly Kemp's tiny flat. The sound echoed down the dingy tile and concrete corridor, lost around the sharp turn under the buzzing strip lights. Twill leaned in close, listening for movement inside. I bit my bottom lip a little too hard, nerves churning in the pit of my stomach. Nothing. Rain mouthed to Twill. The werewolf shook her head. Rain knocked again, and called through the door. Kim, it's me, all right. I'm worried about you, yeah. Won't dash, I hissed, then bit my lip again as Rain put a finger to hers. Won't somebody hear us? I whispered. Twill shrugged. Nobody cares. And nobody's doing bugger all in there, not that I can hear. Rain straightened up and slid a little folded sheath of plastic from her pocket. All right. We go through with the plan. Twill had won the race, met us on floor 14 as the lift doors had opened, grinning from ear to ear and puffing for breath after a dead sprint up all those flights of stairs. Rain had insisted her victory didn't count, as not only had we waited for the lift, but I'd made Rain hold the doors until Tenny joined us, tentacles crammed inside. Twill had laughed and punched Rain in the shoulder, demanding her prize. Our shared mirth died off quickly. Rain led us into the bowels of Gleaston Tower, down the narrow connecting corridors between the flats. A few spirits lurked here and there, but nothing out of the ordinary. We'd passed only one other person, a young mother pushing a buggy toward the lifts, who'd pretended not to see us. Did we really look that dangerous? I suppose we were. Rain unrolled the plastic sheath and extracted a pair of slender steel tools. My heart climbed into my throat. She knelt in front of the door's lock and set to work, tongue in the corner of her lips, eyes staring at nothing as she felt for the resistance of the pins inside the mechanism. Her fingers moved with such delicate care. Never knew you could pick locks, Twill said. I can do a lot of things, Rain muttered, distracted. Fruit of a misspent youth. She squinted in concentration, grunted, there we go, then used the thicker of the two tools to turn the lock. A solid click sounded from within the door. Rain hopped up, slid the lockpick away, and tried the handle very, very carefully. The door opened an inch, hinges silent. You're up. Rain nodded to Twill. Heather, you stick behind me, okay? I nodded, not trusting myself to speak without squeaking. To my surprise, Tenny was sticking behind me, as if I offered any protection whatsoever. She peered over my shoulder, stray tentacles drifting in my peripheral vision. Twill eased the door wide and crept into the flat. Rain followed, every muscle tensed and ready, one hand inside her jacket, with me in her wake. The next few moments felt both a tense violation of social norms, and somehow farcical. Kimberly Kemp's flat was neither large enough nor spooky enough to warrant this kind of treatment. Small, cramped, but nicer than my old bedsit, it consisted of a very short tile entranceway enough to spare the carpet from one's shoes, a tiny combined kitchen and sitting room, and two doors which presumably led off to the bedroom and bathroom, the former of which was wide open on an unmade bed and some discarded clothes. Twill's shoulders hunched like a wary hound. She paused every pace to sniff the air, stepping into the open area of the sitting room and eyeing the doors to bedroom and bathroom. Knock knock, Twill said out loud. Anybody home? Heather, close the front door behind us, please, Rain hissed, so soft but so loud in the silence. Hands fumbling, I pushed the door shut with a resounding click, and winced. Sorry, I whispered. Spine, Twill said, straightening up. There's nobody in here. Tenny slid past me, investigating the kitchen space, tentacles running over the cheap heating rings and ancient dishwasher, before she lost interest and circled around Twill. Can you smell her? Rain asked, voice still soft. Smell when Kim was last here? Twill gave Rain an unimpressed frown. Of course I can smell her, she lives here, you twat. She's not a cat, and neither am I, snot like I can tell when she last rubbed her scent on everything, can I? Rain shrugged an apology and moved forward into the room as well. She craned around without approaching the bedroom, trying to see inside, then slid forward and poked her head through. Nobody here. What about the bathroom? I don't hear nothing, Twill said. Let me guess, you want me to go first? I followed them into the sitting room area. I didn't find it too difficult to calm my racing heart, the decor subdued my nerves. Kimberly had spent a lot of effort making her little flat comfy and welcoming, though I was less sure about her taste. Besides a beanbag chair and a small television with a battered video game console plugged into it, the place was done up like a New Age grotto. The walls sported hanging posters of majestic-looking wolves in suitably fantastical forests and mountains, and a few fancy-colored crystals decorated a bookshelf, accompanied by a tacky statue of a rearing dragon. Of the books themselves, I recognized a few titles from the fake collection of occult junk in the medieval metaphysics room volumes with silver pentagrams on the front, written by people with pen names like Sky Raven and Coven Mistress Dahlia. Through Kimberly's open bedroom door I spied a huge poster of a rainbow-clad unicorn, in pride of place above her bed. It would almost be sweet if I hadn't seen her commanding those zombies for the cult. I had to remind myself of what she'd been involved in. A smoky, musky scent seemed baked into the air. I wrinkled my nose, sniffing. "You smell that too, huh?" Twill asked with a wry smirk. "What it is?" "I think I recognize it, but I'm not sure." "Weed, lots of it," Rain announced. She pointed toward the low table in the center of the room, the sort you're meant to kneel at, complete with a few purple cushions and a blanket. Alongside a licked-clean microwave meal box, the table held a plastic bag full of dried green plant matter, a tab of roll-up papers, and a bag of cigarette filters. 2 completed blunts lay on a small plate. "She was tokeing up last time I visited, didn't think anything of it." "Oh, cannabis." I blinked at the stuff on the table. This was out of my depth. Hey, wait a sec," Twill frowned at the drugs, shaking her head. "Nobody'd leave that much weed behind." "Maybe she dash." Scritch scratch. Ka-thunk. We all froze. My heart leapt into my mouth. Twill flexed claws instead of fingers, and Rain pulled a familiar black metal truncheon from inside her jacket, span it in one hand. That sound had come from the bathroom. A pair of feet kicking across a tiled floor and knocking an object over. "Kim." Rain called. "It's me. Is that you in there? You need to say something, right now, 'cause we don't know dash." The bathroom door burst open. Kimberly Kemp, wide-eyed and screaming, lurched at us with a knife in her hand. Of course, in the panic and terror of the moment, I wasn't able to piece that together anywhere near as neatly, especially as Rain grabbed me first and shoved me clear. All I knew for several pounding heartbeats was adrenaline and fight-or-flight response, my own back against the wall, Tenny rearing up in front of me at the perceived threat, Twill and Rain both shouting. For a split second, amid the confusion, I saw Kimberly's face and I knew we'd gotten this all wrong. She was more terrified than I'd ever seen a human being. Except for myself. Eyes wide, bloodshot and red-rimmed, ringed with heavy dark circles of exhaustion, shaking like a leaf, Kimberly Kemp didn't really see us. She saw whatever she'd expected to break into her apartment, whatever she'd spent the last week hiding from. "Stop, stop!" I shouted. She lashed out with a half-blunt kitchen knife, to ward us off. Rain must have understood what I meant, because she tried to backpedal, the nightstick a poor defense against a manic blade if one wasn't willing to cripple or kill, but Rain didn't want to let her at me. The space was too cramped, too tight, Kimberly too wild, lost inside her own head, not really aiming for any of us. Rain raised one arm as the knife came down, to take the blade on the leather, to take the strike instead of me. Twill caught the knife. With her hand, point first, right through her palm. Metal through meat, the sound turned my stomach. I yelped, a hand to my mouth. Bleeding all over the carpet, knife stabbed halfway through her hand like a Halloween prop, Twill filled the apartment with some of the loudest swearing I'd ever heard. I didn't dash, Kimberly blinked and stammered, trying to scramble back up to her feet. Don't hurt Dash." Rain was on Kimberly in a split second, shoving her onto the carpet, face down, a knee on her back, wrists pinned. The woman was shaking and crying, eyes whirling between us. She saw me and stopped, stared. I hiccuped, at a total loss. Don't no Dash, she blubbered, trying to kick herself free. Rain trod on her ankle. "Stay down," Rain snapped. You Dash," Kimberly whimpered through her teeth. "We're not going to hurt you," I said, as loud and clear as I could make myself, voice shaking with adrenaline shock. Gently I took one of Tenny's tentacles and encouraged her to stand down, to stop waving them like an enraged octopus. Kimberly. Kimberly. We're not going to hurt you. Do you understand? She panted, staring at me, eyes puffy, but I think I got through to her. Twill, you good? Rain asked. Then do it, I snapped. Or ask for help. Thanks for the assist, yeah. Rain called to her. I mean it. I didn't mean dash, Kimberly blubbered. I didn't, but you sent, I dash. Kimberly, I said, struggling to keep all these spinning plates from crashing down. Please stop trying to explain yourself. I'm sure you have a good reason. Okay, let's all slow way down. Okay. First off, Heather, you okay? Rain said, her voice pitched low and gentle. That tone did more than all of my words could. I nodded, and she turned back to Kimberly. Kim, I'm gonna take my knee off your back now, and you're not gonna attack us again, right? Can you promise me you're going to sit up, nice and gentle? Yes. Yes. I'm sorry, sorry dash, she hiccuped, still crying in fear. Sorry, I'm sorry. Rain let off, slowly. Kimberly sat up and scrambled against the wall, still panting, staring at us, making herself as small as possible. Small and mousy, auburn hair sweat matted, dressed in unicorn-patterned pajama bottoms and an oversized pastel pink t-shirt with a cartoon dragon on the front. She looked rough, older than she really was, a lost soul at the end of her rope. She met my eyes again and stared, utterly terrified of me. There's no need to apologize, I said. I'm sorry. Kimberly blurted out. I thought you were Stack, I thought she'd come back again, I dash. Amy Stack? Rain asked gently. From the cult? Kimberly nodded, frantic. Yes, her. I called through the door, Rain said. She stayed crouched, at eye level with Kimberly, watching her carefully. Why would you think I was Amy Stack? Kimberly blinked at her. But, because, she was here. She was Dash. She came here. Rain shared a look with me. A cold hand trailed down my spine, and suddenly I didn't blame Kimberly for locking herself away all week. Stack terrified me. Why didn't you call me? I told you we'd handle it if they contacted you again. You must have heard it was us out here, why come at me with a knife? Kimberly stared between us, frozen for a moment, as if we should already know this. Or as if we were trying to catch her out with a trick question. It's okay, I said. She glanced at me, and I decided to gamble, play the part she might need. She'd been in Alexander's cult, easily led and easily dominated. Perhaps she needed a firm hand, a commanding voice telling her what to do. I put on the best Evelyn impression I could muster, still shaky inside. I'm in charge here. You know who I am, and what I can do, and I'm not going to hurt you, and neither is Twill. Oi. Twill snapped. And neither is Twill, I repeated, forcing a hard bite into my voice. I winced inside, I'd need to apologize for that one later. What did Amy Stack want with you, and why did you attack us? I promise, I don't already know. None of us do. I'm not trying to gaslight you, or toy with you. Please. Kimberly shook her head at me. How can you not know? She was here on Saturday, last Saturday, she was looking for Lauren. I made a mistake, I wanted to, she must have seen me go dash. A cold fist slid into my gut. A high-pitched sound rang on the edge of my hearing. Lauren? I heard myself ask. Lauren Lilburn. Lozzie. You sent her here, right? She's with you lot now, isn't she? I don't know what you did to her, but it's none of my business, it's okay, I don't care, please don't dash. When? I demanded. Kimberly flinched. What? Heather, Rain murmured, and stood up, one hand on my shoulder. She squeezed, but I felt nothing. Lozzie, I repeated. When was she here? Last Friday. I thought she was with you. I thought that was your message, how she'd been, changed. Kimberly rushed to explain herself, running over her own words, but I soaked up everything she said, my mind racing at 1,000 miles an hour. I let her in be, but I was too scared to ask her anything. I'm sorry, I should have. I thought you were showing me what you'd done to her. Like AAT threat. Lauren Lilburn is my friend, I managed, going numb all over. I'd never do anything bad to her. She was, I murmured. My blood ran so very cold. Numb. A weight pressing down on my chest. Hands quivering, a high-pitched ringing in my ears. Ashes in my mouth, the taste of inevitability. Rain and Twill both spoke, but they sounded so far away, as if I was underwater. I screwed my eyes shut, and when I opened them again I realized I was staring right through Kimberly, still cowering on her sitting room floor. When Lozzie was here dash. Kimberly flinched at the sound of my voice stretched tight, to breaking point. I struggled to focus. When Lozzie was here, you saw her, was she was. Why yes. Kimberly squeaked, so eager to please. I squeezed my hands into fists, digging fingernails into my palms. Must stop shaking. My head swam, hot panic forcing its way up my throat. Too many questions, and I already knew the answers. Nowhere to go. Nothing I could do. I felt so helpless, a wave of strangled frustration superheating itself into black despair. Heather, hey, Rain murmured, squeezing my shoulders, trying to catch my eye. None of this means a thing yet. We all need to slow down and figure this out, okay? What did she do? What did she look like? I snapped at Kimberly, too hard, enough to make her start in fear again. Was it really her? Was it her? Heather. Rain put a firm hand on the back of my neck, fingers in my hair. Hey, look at me. Don't you understand? I whirled on her. If Lozzie was here, that means dash. I stopped short, as if giving voice to my horrified deduction would make it true. I rounded on Kimberly again. What did she look like? Exactly, what did she look like? Like, I don't dash. She raised her hands to ward me off. Please don't be angry dash. Did she look like herself? Like the Lozzie you knew? Slowly, hesitating, eyes locked on mine, Kimberly shook her head. Did she? I could barely squeeze the words out. Like something was pulling her around, like a puppet. Kimberly bit her lower lip and glanced at Rain, who graced her with a reassuring nod. It's okay, you can answer. Nobody's angry with you. That's a pretty good way of putting it, yes. I shook off Rain's grip, suddenly claustrophobic and constricted, too hot in my scarf and coat. I pulled them away from my throat. Breathing too fast, almost hyperventilating. Needed more air, couldn't breathe, had to take action, had to do something. I cast around the room for a handhold, anything at all, my eyes glazing across Twill still at the sink, staring at me, Rain speaking, her words lost to the ringing in my ears, Tenny waving her bunched tentacles, agitated by my panic. Lozzie, what have you done to yourself? I whined, and bit down on my lips to still my voice. Heather, hey. Rain tried to catch my frantic hands as I tugged at my scarf. Heather, slow down, breathe. You're having a panic attack. A justified one. I snapped at her. Did I miss part of this? Twill asked, wide-eyed, still flexing her blood-smeared hand to shake off the remains of the knife wound. Could say that, yeah, Rain answered. I turned on Twill. Can you smell if Lozzie was in here? You can do that, can't you? If she was here a week ago you must be able to pick up her scent. Was she here? Ah. Twill stared at me, frozen, balanced on eggshells. Was she here? Twill, please, please try. Heather, look at me, Rain said, soft and coaxing, but I couldn't think of anything else right now. If Lozzie had been here, then I was right, and Evelyn was wrong. Twill made a show of sniffing the air, then shrugged, still frowning at me like I was an explosive pressure plate. Kinda hard to tell with all the ganja smell, and it was a week ago, yeah. Then she wasn't. It wasn't really her. Later I felt awful for putting Twill on the spot like that, subjecting her to my wild demands. Desperate for the slimmest handhold, I pleaded for her sense of smell to prove my worst fears incorrect. I dunno. I never knew her for long, not enough to learn her scent proper. Twill pulled a pained grimace. Look, I can't smell Lozzie, so maybe it wasn't her. I'm not lying. Kimberly almost shouted. I'm not lying, I promise, I wouldn't lie to you. I promise. And not lying. Nobody's accusing anybody of lying, Rain said, and finally grabbed me by the wrists, holding my hands down. Heather, look at me. She used her voice like a steel whip, the kind she never directed at me, enough to make me flinch and obey from sheer shock. I blinked back at her, almost panting. Heather, breathe, she said, soft and serious. Focus on breathing. You're in the middle of a panic attack, okay? Just breathe with me, in and out. Slow right down, yeah. Rain, I whined. What if I saw the real Lozzie, outside? What if it was her? What else can teleport between dimensions except her and I? If she was here, if what I saw outside was here, it must really be her. Then right now Lozzie might need you, and she needs you to be thinking clearly. I know how much she means to you. We will find her, I promise. I shook my head. More than that. It's more than that. I can't put it into words. I know, Rain murmured. And in that moment, staring back at her boundless confidence, she made me believe she knew all my fears, the ones I couldn't voice, the terror of leaving myself behind. For a moment, she made me believe, and it worked. I knew she didn't, not really. But it did work. Take a deep breath, Heather. Do it now, okay? Just one, for me, come on. I nodded, managed to suck down a deep breath, and another, slowing, steadying. The numb, hot panic began to ebb away. I nodded again, tried to still myself. I have to do something. I have to find her. We will. But first, let's get some information, okay? Rain cracked a smile for me. Look before you leap isn't exactly my style, I know, but I think this is your show now. I managed another nod. Hey, don't look at me, Twill said, and I turned to see she was addressing Kimberly with a shrug. I don't know what this is about either. Second time they've pulled this on me, I'm in the dark here. She gave us both an unimpressed look. I'll tell you, but first I really must sit down, I said. Rain raised her eyebrows and pointed a thumb at the kitchen. Cup of tea, anybody? Not the most relaxing cup of tea I'd ever had, but it did the job. Kimberly needed that space and time as much as I did, to calm down, and it provided a good excuse for us to all sit around the little floor-height table and pretend, if only for a couple of minutes, that we were normal people. A group of young women visiting a friend on a Sunday lunchtime, for a chat and a cup of tea. The truth sounded like the setup to a bad joke, a sociopath, a werewolf, and a mathematician all prepared to interrogate a necromancer. None of us expected to laugh at the punchline. Rain made the tea, not Kimberly, who seemed to require every last scrap of courage to merely sit cross-legged at her own table without bolting, though some of that may have been embarrassment at the rather sad state of her kitchen. She only owned 2 mugs, one of which was badly chipped, so instead I was allotted a measuring jug, and Rain was going to drink out of a cereal bowl. The waiting was so awkward that perhaps paradoxically it helped me calm down further. Twill stared at Kimberly, grudge written on her face, and Kimberly stared at the tabletop, frozen in fear. Now that Kimberly was no longer waving a knife around, Tenny had decided she approved, and stopped trying to interpose herself between us, wandering off to run her sticky black tentacles over the contents of Kimberly's flat. I thought it better not to mention Tenny, and I could have stayed quiet while Rain took 30 seconds to brew the tea, but my frayed nerves couldn't take the tension in Twill's omnidirectional scowl. "Twill," I said. "You're death glaring. Stop it." Her palm was blemishless. Werewolf healing had sealed it up already. I rolled my eyes. Panic had turned to exasperation. We had more important matters to deal with. "Hey, so, Kim," Rain piped up from over in the little kitchen. Kimberly flinched, eyes jerking up as if to obey an order. "Yes. Yes. If you don't remember names, here's some for you," Rain said, as she filled the mugs and substitute mugs with hot water over tea bags. "The very pretty short one to your left is Heather. She's kind of in charge, so listen to what she says, and the one with a face like a smacked arse, that's Twill." "So you're going to sulk, like a big baby?" I asked. Twill boggled at me. "You're invincible. I assumed you caught the knife on purpose, to spare Rain's arm." "Well, yeah. But it's still bloody well hurt." "I am so very sorry," Kimberly said. We all paused at Kimberly's quivering apology. In the moment's silence that followed, I really looked at her, for the first time. She was a wreck, much worse than the scared woman I recalled from the aftermath of the cult's pocket dimension. Her clothes were clean enough and actually quite cute, between the unicorn print pajamas and the bubbly, goofy cartoon dragon on her t-shirt, but Kimberly herself looked far from healthy or whole. Her face was pale and drawn, gaze downcast, eyes ringed by dark circles of exhaustion. She'd been chewing and biting her lips, mangling her own flesh in a nervous tic that must have been going on for weeks, spotted with dried blood and half-healed cracks. An irritated scab had formed on the side of her neck, from incessant scratching, and her chin was bruised where Rain had thumped her to the floor. I had the distinct impression her auburn hair was naturally much brighter, as if the color had been leached from her. She looked weary, a weariness that even adrenaline couldn't shake. I'd know that look anywhere. Here was a woman who hadn't slept properly in a long time. Had we done this to her, or was this the backlash from her own memories, payback for being part of what I'd witnessed in the cavern beneath the cult's castle? My heart went out to her, but I hardened it a little, on purpose. Lozzie had vouched that Kimberly had never killed anybody, but that was all. "Yeah, bloody right, you should be sorry, you dash," Twill barked. Kimberly shuffled back from the table. At first I thought she was retreating from Twill's shout, but then, shaking like a leaf, hands clasped tight in her lap, she bowed her head until her face was level with the floor. "You should hey, don't, dash," Twill trailed off, frowning. "What are you doing?" "I apologize for harming you, and I'm very sorry for attacking you all." "I am very sorry." She swallowed, her effort not quite enough to keep her voice steady. "Please accept my apology. I'm not worthy, and I'm not import dash." Stop. Bloody hell." Twill squinted at her in horror. "Don't do that, just say sorry. You don't have to grovel." Kimberly didn't move. She stared at the floor. I think I was beginning to understand her. Perhaps she didn't deserve my heart to be quite so hard. "It's all right, you can sit up," I murmured to her. "You don't have to treat us like that, we're not like the Sherrowford cult." "Your apology is accepted. Isn't it, Twill?" "Oh, yeah. Sure. As long as you don't do it again." Kimberly still didn't move a muscle, except a hesitant glance at me from the corner of her eye. "Kimberly, sit up," I ordered. She stayed frozen for another moment, then slowly straightened up, blinking at us like a cornered animal. "Look, no harm done, yeah." Twill smiled and held up her hand, flexed her fingers like claws. "S'already healed, just like that. Cool, huh?" Bet you wish you could do that. Kimberly nodded. Most impressive. Rain bustled over with the tea, clacking mugs and substitutes down on the table, settling herself on her knees across from me. Twill gulped the stuff down like it wasn't piping hot, and Kimberly seemed to rejuvenate slightly after a sip or two. She began to breathe a little steadier. I forced myself to drink, still flushed and unsteady from the panic attack, still trying to distract myself from the million questions and gut-wrenching worries, still a useless lump without a way to help my friend. Ah, Rain sighed, big smile on her face. There, isn't that better? Nice and civilized now. Best thing about a brew. I nodded, not trusting myself to answer properly, and focused on another sip of tea. So what's all this about Lozzie, then? Twill asked, first me, then Rain. Is this another one of Evelyn's big secrets? Rain shook her head. Bit complex. Heather's seen her, that's all, or something pretending to be her. Yeah, I kinda followed that part, I think. I took a deep breath, trying not to let the panic back in. Outside, I said. I saw her outside. And she was all wrong. Not herself. Twill's eyebrows climbed. She stared at me in exactly the way I didn't want to be stared at. Right. Right then. We don't know it was really her, Rain added, for my sake, but it had the opposite effect. If she was here as well, that means it's the same thing I saw outside, I snapped, then shuddered as I forced a deep breath. That means it's Lozzie. Don't treat me like a child, Rain. I can deal with this. I'm serious, Rain said, and I could see she was. We don't know it's really her. I had to avert my eyes. My panic had transmuted into anger, a determination to do something. But there was nothing I could do. Hard but brittle, determined but rudderless. I'd suffered a panic attack once before, in the bath after the failed kidnapping attempt, and I remembered it all too well. The shaking, the replaying memory, the shortness of breath. I knew it didn't mean I was a coward, though I was. For other reasons it was a physical response that I had no control over. But this time was different, nothing had happened to me, no bottle trauma bursting forth. I felt utterly useless. Useless. Turned out I was more similar to Rain than I'd always assumed. I'd learnt that over the past few months, to my enduring surprise, I could be good in a crisis but only when a clear action presented itself. A person to flee from, or run to, a foe to defeat, a friend to save. But what could I do here, now, for Lozzie? Nothing. I didn't even know how to locate her. She was out there somewhere, in God alone knows what state, maybe even worse than dead, and I was sitting in a nice warm room having a cup of tea. I cursed myself for a fool. Perhaps I didn't care enough, perhaps that was the truth. Lozzie was a stand-in for Maisie, or for myself, and I was terrible. Half a person, and a bad friend. I had to find her. How? You're the, Kimberly murmured, interrupting my rousing self-hate session. She took another sip of tea to steady herself, and addressed Twill again. Please excuse me for using a crude term. You're the Brinkwood W. werewolf, aren't you? Twill grinned like a cat that got the cream. Kimberly was about to stammer out another apology. Your reputation precedes you, I said. Lucky you, Twill. Ha! Twill barked with laughter. Yeah, you know it. That would be me, yeah. Your lot sorry, former lot knew all about me, huh? You did come up in conversation several times. Kimberly swallowed before adding, as a person to be wary of. Rawr. Twill made a silly monster noise and mock menaced with her hands, laughing. Kimberly managed to pull a very, very hesitant smile. Twill's a huge numpty, she's not scary at all, Rain said. And neither is Heather, she added before Twill could launch off on one at her. We're all friends here now, right? I'm not a numpty, you dick, Twill muttered. Sure, Kimberly said, and I saw her throat bob as she swallowed. Friends. Rain. I sighed. Couldn't you phrase that in a way which doesn't make you sound like a mafia enforcer? Ah. Rain laughed. I'm serious though. We're taking it nice and slow, having a cup of tea, all friends now. Kim, can I call you Kim? I asked, and Kimberly nodded hesitantly. Rain is incredibly stupid sometimes too, and I'm sorry for how intimidating she can be. She didn't bother you the first 2 times she came to visit, did she? Kimberly glanced at Rain from the corner of her eye, then shook her head. Not at all, no, not at all. I understand you have to be sure of me. I just want out. Her carefully guarded front slipped, her face falling before she took a shaky breath and pulled herself back together. I'm sorry. I understand. How's your chin feel, Kim? Rain asked, and gestured a little too close to Kimberly's chin with her bowl of tea. Bumped you pretty bad there, sorry about that. Oh, Kimberly probed the bruise on her chin, which was rapidly turning purple. She suppressed a wince. No, I'm fine. Thank you. Rain. I gave her a look. I might not be able to speak your private language of subtle physical intimidation, but even I can read that. Stop it. Stop what? Rain spread her hands. Hey, I'm sorry, really. You didn't sound it. It's okay, I'm okay, Kimberly blurted out. Really, I'm fine, please. Please don't fight. Rain and I shared a glance, equally embarrassed. A lover's quarrel, at a time like this? I sighed. We're not, I said. I'm scared for my friend, and it's making me irritable. I'm sorry too. Kimberly stared at me, uncertain how to accept that apology. Shall we start at the beginning then? Rain asked. Take it in your own time, Kim, tell us what you saw. The beginning? Rain raised her eyebrows, then looked at me. I did not feel in charge. I felt lost and useless, but I had to be strong, somehow. Marshalling my thoughts, I tried to start at the beginning. What time did Lozzie show up here? I asked. Oh, Kimberly mouthed. The beginning. Yes. Okay. Kimberly's fragile composure came tumbling down. She opened her mouth, closed it again, swallowed very hard on a dry throat and took a long draught of tea, hand trembling. Nervously, she glanced at our faces, then pointed at her little plastic bag on the table, the one full of dried cannabis, next to the hand-rolled cigarettes on their protective plate. I'm sorry, this is very difficult for me. Do you mind if I? You want to toke up? Rain asked. Twill snorted to herself. Kimberly nodded, seemingly embarrassed. It's the only thing that helps anymore. You can't sleep, I blurted out, a moment of true empathy. Kimberly stared at me. How did you know that? It's sort of obvious. I'm not a mind reader or anything, don't worry. I know the feeling, that's all. Obvious, You're right, I can't sleep, things keep running through my head. Things, all the time. I can't stop thinking about she came up short, lost and distracted. I wish I could delete all memory of the last 6 months. I'm sorry. I don't want to be blowing smoke in your faces. I can go to the bathroom window, or something. Is that when you joined the cult? 6 months ago? Rain asked. I heard a hint of cold in her voice, though I doubt any but me would have noticed. Kimberly shook her head, hugging her arms around herself protectively. No, that was earlier, last February, but it didn't get bad until I realized I couldn't leave. I can tell you all about it, if you like. Lozzie first, I said, softly, and Kimberly nodded, resigning herself to the task. Well, I don't mind 30 minutes of second-hand smoke, Rain said. Any tobacco in that? Oh, no. What about you two? Rain asked Twill, and Twill shrugged, and I shook my head, too focused on thoughts of Lozzie to care right now. Kimberly bowed her head, muttered a thank you, and plucked one of the hand-rolled cannabis cigarettes from the little plate on the table. She dug around under the plastic bag full of weed and located a lighter, flicked the tiny flame on, and lit up. She didn't smoke very much of the reefer. I've been informed by Rain that's the correct term. One short puff to start her off, then a long, deep drag which made the end of the roll-up glow like embers. Kimberly closed her eyes, held the smoke in her lungs, before carefully blowing it out the corner of her mouth, away from us. Still, the smoke filled the air with a heavy, musky scent. Perhaps it was a placebo effect, but I swear I saw her muscles begin to relax, saw the tightness around her eyes let up, saw her become more human and less a terrified animal. She blinked several times and knuckled at her bleary eyes, then awkwardly offered the reefer to us. "Would you like some?" "Nah," Twill grunted. "Oh, thank you, but no." I shook my head. I wouldn't know where to start. "I would," Rain said, "but I gotta keep a clear head on my shoulders. Wouldn't wanna be all floppy if Stack turns up right now, would I?" Kimberly's eyes widened at Stack's name. Suddenly her gaze flicked up, over Rain, toward her front door. "Did you lock the door?" "You did lock it, didn't you?" "When I made the tea, yeah. Made sure." "No worries." Kimberly nodded. She took one more long drag, then put the cigarette out with great care, gently stubbing it on the little plate, then pinching the end with her fingers to make sure it had stopped burning. "Better?" Rain asked. "Getting there, yes, thank you." Kimberly closed her eyes again for a long moment, concentrating on the contents of her own head and bloodstream, I assume. Rain and Twill shared a wry look, but the whole process had fascinated me, and I couldn't help but wonder what she felt like now, what kinds of pain the drug took away from her. When she opened her eyes again she looked almost relaxed, and younger, her real age, less haggard and run down. "Your hair is longer than I remember," she said to me, voice a little loose, and even managed a small smile. "Suits you." "Oh, thank you." That was the last thing I'd expected. Kimberly was right though, my hair was longer than on our first, brief meeting. My hair hadn't seen scissors since I'd moved to Sherrowford, getting on for almost 7 months now, the ends of my tresses well past the base of my neck. I hadn't thought about that in months, until a random stoned compliment from an ex-cultist. Rain laughed. "We're on to the stoner talk already." "I'm sorry," Kimberly blurted out. "It's only to take the edge off." "Will you tell me about Lozzie now?" I asked. "Please." Kimberly nodded. "Are you going to help her? She's a good kid, she never deserved any of this." It's a good thing you killed her brother." "I never thanked you for that." "I should. I think." She frowned to herself, suddenly lost in confused thought. A lump formed in my throat. "I'm going to try. I have to find her first." "Start at the beginning," Rain prompted softly. "What happened?" Kimberly sniffed and stared at the extinguished blunt for a heartbeat. She wouldn't stop knocking. "What?" I breathed. "A knock on the door doesn't happen much around here, not to me anyway. There's only a few people who might knock on my front door, and the door frame won't hold a chain properly, so I have to call out. You know, who is it, and hope they don't decide to break in." She pulled a weird little smile. "That's never happened before, by the way, so well done." "I didn't break the lock," Rain said gently. "Picked it. It'll work fine." So, I get home from my shift about 5:30 last Thursday night, and then there's this knock on my door. Right away, like somebody had followed me up the stairs, right behind me. Only I hadn't seen a soul. I'm very careful. I have to be. Kimberly took another deep breath, hands gripping each other tight in her lap. So I called out, but there wasn't any reply, just another knock. The first couple of times, I thought it was kids messing around. I thought they would run off when I came to the door. So I stood there, to listen. And I heard this breathing. Through the door. Twill said. "'S pretty thick." Kimberly nodded, shaking slightly. "I've seen some weird things, with the Brotherhood, things I don't want to think about again, and when I heard that breathing I knew something was standing out there, something that shouldn't be. Waiting for me to I don't know, to stop paying attention, so it could hurt me." "What made you feel that?" Rain asked. I couldn't say a thing, hanging on every word. Kimberly shrugged. "Intuition." The breathing sounded wrong, like she couldn't pump the air in and out of her lungs properly. "But you opened the door eventually, right?" Rain said. Kimberly closed her eyes, radiating regret, before she nodded again. "I couldn't take it anymore. It was dark out, and getting late, and she kept waiting longer and longer between knocks, and then hammering on the door all at once. I figured if it was the Brotherhood, then they'd be more direct, so maybe it was a junkie or something, just somebody from the estate messing with me. Then I got this idea in my head, that maybe one of my thralls had survived, come back to me, just for somewhere to go." "Thralls?" Twill squinted at her. "She means zombies," Rain said. "Zombies? Oh, I suppose so, yes. That's a good word. Anyway, I thought maybe that wouldn't be so bad. I mean, I didn't want to think about them again, I'm never going to do it again, I swear to the goddess. But at least I could put it to rest. I thought maybe I'd get it safely inside, then call you, maybe Say could put it down. Send it back. I don't know how that part works. I was sure that's what it was, but I was just making myself feel better. I took a knife from the kitchen, hid it behind my back, just in case, and opened the door. And it was her." Kimberly stared at nothing for a moment. The weed and the tea wasn't enough to hold back what she'd seen. "Lozzie, what had you done to yourself?" "Kim." I almost couldn't whisper. "Please, I have to know. She's really important to me." Kimberly swallowed and pulled herself together again. "Lauren, Lozzie, she wasn't herself. I'd know her anywhere, she was always so sweet to me. She tried to step inside. I didn't say a word to her, I couldn't, but I didn't want her to touch me, not the way she looked, so I just backed up and let her in. I wanted to scream. The knife, that was stupid, pointless. What did she look like?" I whispered. "She just stepped inside and circled each of the rooms, it was so weird. Have you ever seen a cat in a new place?" Kimberly jerked round at us suddenly, eyes wide and blinking. "When they don't know where they are, they'll circle around the edge of the rooms. It was like that." "Mapping?" "I don't know, I have no earthly idea what she was doing." "Kim, please. She looked wrong, all right?" Kimberly blurted out. "Like you said before, like something else was pulling strings connected to her muscles. I think she was trying to smile at me, but goddess, it didn't look like that, she couldn't pull the muscles right. She walked like a machine, all her parts wrong, and I was so afraid she was going to touch things, like my bed, and everything would be contaminated." Kimberly was tearing up, squeezing the words out. I don't know why I felt that. She wasn't human anymore, but it wasn't like a thrall, it was something else and it was filthy and wrong and it wasn't supposed to be here. "Filthy," I echoed, and let the word hang in the air, in my mind, the idea wrenching at the inside of my chest. Rain reached across the table and took my hand, squeezed hard. "It wasn't her. Heather, we don't know if it was really her." "She spoke," Kimberly said. "Once. She spoke. If you could call it speaking. When she finished circling the rooms, she stood right there." Kimberly pointed at the middle of the floor, staring at me. Her voice, it was like she couldn't inflect the words, didn't know how to say them. "In a way, it wasn't her, you're right. It wasn't Lauren Lilburn at all. She said, back to school, and then she left. A moment of silence stretched out over the low table. Twill puffed a big sigh and muttered, "That's some creepy shit all right." "Back to school?" I echoed. "What does that mean?" "I don't know, I don't want to know," Kimberly said, burying her head in her arms. "I don't want to know any more about magic, I don't. It's not real, none of this. Please, I don't want to know. Back to school." The phrase echoed inside me, down into the abyssal depths, until it found suitable material with which to resonate. The I's lessons. I'd never questioned before why I thought of them as lessons. Back to school. Had the I gotten to Lozzie somehow? Why would it? Why would it care about her? What did that mean? What if it was directed at me? A cry for help. Back to school. In the black silt layer of my soul, I began to make a plan. I sent the first tentative mental probes down into that lightless abyss where I buried all those years of the I's lessons, where I tried not to think about them. The first tremors of nausea and the pinprick tingling of a headache reared up slowly, the heads of a watchful hydra, as I posed a question of all that in human knowledge. I had to find Lozzie. There had to be way. How? My fingers strayed unconsciously to the fractal on my left forearm, underneath my sleeve. Time to dredge the depths. What did Lozzie look like, other than the obvious and creepy part? Rain asked. What? Kimberly emerged from behind her arms. What was she wearing? Was she clean? Glowing blue and purple. Rainbow socks. Oh, yes, that's what surprised me. That's why I thought she was with you. See, clean, I mean, not glowing or whatever. Taken care of, you know. I don't remember what she was wearing. Jeans, maybe? A coat? But she was clean. Hair was all brushed. She was even wearing shoes. That's not like her. Kimberly sniffed. Do you mind if I smoke again? Go right ahead, Rain murmured, more concerned with me than Kimberly. She raised an eyebrow at me, a silent question. I realized I was sweating, eyes scrunched tight, trying to hide the mad thing I was doing. I'm fine, I lied, then forced a strained smile and a deep breath. I'm just thinking. I wasn't fine. Even the effort of defining the right question of the I's lessons was enough to make me feel like vomiting. I had a map of the universe in my head, our reality, outside, everywhere, and the tools to use it, but I could barely touch them without searing my mind with white-hot fire, let alone rummage through them for such a specific purpose. When she left, where did she go? Rain was asking Kimberly. I squinted, trying to think of another way. I don't know, Kimberly said. I didn't follow her. Look, I know I'm falling apart, but I'm not crazy. I wouldn't have followed her for anything. I locked the door and cleaned up, and then I hid, all right. In bed. Anyone would have. Maybe. Rain nodded, trying to keep it light. Maybe I would have too. Still, you should have called me. I'm sorry, I'm really sorry. Kimberly's head twitched, on the verge of another scraping bow, but she caught herself at the last second. Stack came the next morning. I couldn't. Finding Lozzie with hyperdimensional mathematics would be the most complex thing I'd ever attempted. This was no bending or breaking of physical laws, no bullet deflecting or teleporting a handful of dirt. This was metaphysical. How could I even specify her, define her? Her body. Her soul. Did I have the mathematics to describe the human soul, a particular human soul? I winced. A spike of pain jabbed into the back of my skull, just from thinking of that idea. Too deep, too toxic, too dangerous. Perhaps I could find the correct equation to define the human soul, but I'd cook my brain long before I got there. There must be another way. Did she leave anything behind? I asked. The others all looked at me. I sniffed and wiped my forehead. Lozzie, I mean. Did she leave anything behind? No. No, nothing at all. Heather? Rain asked. I'm fine, I lied again. I'm just worried, and hungry. It's been a morning, hasn't it? Why don't we all go out and get something to eat? Rain asked, and nodded to Kimberly. I'll treat you too, yeah. Not yet. Let's finish this first, I said quickly. We couldn't leave the room now. I had an idea, and I needed to be in here for it to work, or so I thought. Rain frowned at me. Are you sure you're feeling all right? I'm fine, Rain. What happened with Stack? I asked Kimberly, to get the conversation moving again, to take everyone's attention off me. She knocked on your door too? Kimberly nodded. In the morning, at dawn. The knocking woke me, though I hadn't really slept. When I asked who it was, she said it was her, completely open. She said if I didn't open up, then she'd wait on the estate for me and find me when I came out and do things, to me. I believed her. She would. She would really do that. She asked the same things you did, about Lauren. And told me not to tell anybody else. Meaning us. Rain frowned. I didn't tell her I'm in contact with you, because she didn't ask. Believe me, please, if she had, I would have. She only cared about Lauren's visit, and then she left. Now if she knows you came here, goddess, please, I don't want her to come back. She'll kill me, she'll really do it. Kimberly shook, barely able to hold her reefer without dropping it. The others, they'll call me an apostate, be angry, but Stack, there's nothing inside her. My mind was a million miles away, elbow deep in the mud at the bottom of my soul. I tried to hide it, sit upright, hold back the mounting pain in my skull, resist the urge to clench up around my stomach. An equation, wedded to the map, not to find Lozzie but to find whatever was in this flat last Thursday night. Time, that was definable, I could just about do that without being horribly sick everywhere. Space, well, I had that right in front of me, Kimberly's cramped sitting room. All I had to do was rewind, track backwards, find that Lozzie who was here and use her as a reference point. So simple, put into words. Just like that, just rewind time inside my head, pinch the loose threads left behind by a passing entity and follow them to their current destination. It was the most complex piece of hyperdimensional mathematics I'd ever attempted, and I couldn't even touch each component as I prodded them into place. I'd put it together all at once, when it was ready, and try not to foul Kimberly's carpet with the contents of my stomach. I glanced up, at her open bathroom door. Yes, I'd make it there in time, it was only a few paces. I'd apologize afterwards. I had to do this now. Lozzie needed me. Rain leaned back, watching Kimberly's face with shrewd attention. That's the only reason she failed to notice what I was brewing. We might be able to help with Stack, maybe, depending on, well, you see, when you were trying to explain yourself to us earlier, Kim, you said that Stack must have seen you go. Kimberly blinked up at Rain, frozen for a second. What's this? Twill grinned. Been up to no good again? Kimberly shook her head. No, I dash. Go where? Rain asked, low and gentle, and then happened to glance at me. Heather? Hey, what's wrong? Twill asked. Oh, Kimberly mouthed, and scooted back from me. I felt a bead of blood leak from my nose and trickle down to my lips. I couldn't speak. Heather, what's dash? Rain's eyes went wide. She knew what this looked like, by now. What are you doing? Finding Lozzie, I squeaked. Heather, whoa, stop. Rain reached for me. I rocked backward, away from her. All I needed was another few seconds. I nudged that final essential piece into place, that conceptual assumption, the one I hadn't questioned. Who did I need to find? Whoever was in this flat last Thursday. The definition in place, I saw, as a molten spire of pain erupted up my brainstem and into my skull. Described in mind-melting hell math, I saw. And the thing I'd defined the thing in this flat last Thursday stared back at me through the equation I'd built, and caught me looking. I'd built an equation to find Lozzie via locating Kimberly's mysterious uninvited guest jury-rigged from scraps of half-understood hyperdimensional mathematics, so certain that the worst possible outcome was mere failure and pain, vomiting and unconsciousness. Not exactly unfamiliar. A risk worth taking, a punishment worth subjecting myself to. What kind of friend was I if I wasn't willing to endure that for her sake? How could I ever hope to rescue my sister if I couldn't muster the courage to find Lozzie? But the subject of my search had found me first. An awareness, staring back at me through the cracks in the equation, summoned by the act of giving it definition. It was not Lozzie. I didn't see it with my eyes, of course. I saw nothing. I suspect I'd have gone screaming mad on the spot if I had. My physical eyes still looked at Rain as she reached for me, frozen in an elongating moment as if caught on the edge of a black hole, the time inside my mind stretched out to infinity by the instant of terrible contact. Meaning coalesced out of the mathematics, greater than the sum of the equation's parts, true definition found in the spaces between. Like the moment an autostereogram, a magic eye picture resolves into an image, or one flicks on the light at night and does a double take at a coat over a chair, thinking it's a person. I see you, it said. Not in words, but via that unspeakable feeling crawling inside my skull, the feeling of being caught looking. I felt like a mouse, wedged inside a rotting tree trunk on the forest floor, peeping out through a crack in the wood at the undergrowth and damp leaves, as something huge and reptilian slithered along the ground outside and put a great, unblinking eye to the window in my hidey-hole. Such sensations were sadly and fortunately not alien to me. The eye's attention, in my horrid memories and the old dreams, had felt much the same way, except magnified 1,000 times more than this, a scrutiny that peeled away one's skin and bone and neurons and atoms. I was perhaps the one person in the world who could endure this attention without losing my mind, because I'd had worse before. How it saw me, I had no idea, but I knew what to do. I let go of the equation, let it unravel, like cutting a fishing net loose when you've accidentally caught a shark. Then I felt the rest, the trailing sensations behind, I see you, recognition, familiarity, knowledge. I see you, Heather. And I can dance like that too. Watch. The Lozzie thing, the outsider in her head, whatever in God's name it was, it came scuttling up through the equation I'd built, using the collapsing strands of my own work as a ladder to reach into my mind, spanning the gaps with its own hyperdimensional mathematics. Like a spider spinning webs to mend the holes in a rickety scaffold, it scurried across the fabric of reality, toward me. A trap. This whole thing was a trap, aimed at me. All that happened in a split second, at the speed of thought, in the time it took me to blink, as Rain reached across Kimberly's little table to grab my shoulders. Stop, I wheezed and slammed the brakes on the equation. Bits and pieces of hyperdimensional mathematics span off like an exploding combustion engine inside my head, seared my mind with fragments of white-hot metal, shook my soul like a storm in a bottle. The throb of a truly earth-shattering headache washed over me in a wave of pain. I jerked forward, an involuntary spasm, banged my face into the table, then reared back up with a ragged choking gasp, and noticed I'd left a bloody smear on the cheap wood. Holy shit, said Twill. Oh goddess, oh, what, oh dash, Kimberly stammered, scrambling to her feet. With the equation dead, that scuttling awareness finally receded into the abyss. Toilet, I squeezed out between my roiling guts and the ice pick lodged in the back of my skull. My mouth tasted of blood. My vision swam, black at the edges. My legs shook as I tried to stand up, banging my knees on the table and sending my empty measuring jug of tea skittering across the carpet. Even Tenny sensed something was desperately wrong, bunching and retracting her tentacles like a panicked squid. Tea toilet dash. Then Rain had me. She pulled me to my feet and into Kimberly's cramped bathroom. She held my hair while I vomited. Only once, only a little, and that only bile and tea. I clenched up so hard I strained my stomach muscles, determined to keep my breakfast down, to master this. It hurt, but I didn't give in, though I did kneel in front of the toilet for a long few minutes, breathing slowly and trying to process what had happened, what I'd seen. That's it, breathe real slow, Heather. Take it slow, take all the time you need, I'm right here. Rain's free hand rubbed the base of my neck. The hell was she doing? Twill asked from the bathroom door. Shit, Heather, you alright? I gave her a sarcastic thumbs up from down by the toilet bowl. Give her a minute, Rain warned. You found her, didn't you? Kimberly asked, voice barely a whisper. You found Lauren, and it wasn't her, was it? I said, give her a minute, Rain repeated, but I shook my head, wiped my body nose on the back of my hand, and felt tears threaten in my eyes. It worked, I croaked. And it was her. It was Lozzie. 3 glasses of water for the lost fluids and to wash out the taste of blood, a blanket around my shoulders for the clutching cold inside me, and a bag of frozen peas from Kimberly's tiny box freezer for the bruise around my right eye. That last one would be interesting to explain if anybody at university asked, let alone any concerned staff. Yes, I head-butted a table, thank you for asking, and no, my girlfriend doesn't hit me. It was Lozzie because it sounded like her, I repeated for the 3rd time. I'm certain. I thought you said it was just like, maths. Twill squinted at me. I'd lost her minutes ago, but I was too drained to come up with a proper metaphor. And hey, Kimberly, you said this thing didn't sound anything like Lozzie at all, right? Kimberly nodded to Twill, but her eyes watched me. For approval. She'd been staring at me with renewed awe since the moment Rain had helped me stagger back out of the little bathroom. It made my skin crawl, especially after spending minutes on my knees, delivering a technicolor yawn into her toilet. How could she look at me like I was some kind of pagan idol? She understood even less about what I'd done than Twill did, but incomprehension didn't stop Kimberly hanging on every word I'd said in my halting, confused effort to explain what just happened. Didn't want to know any more about magic, did she? Kimberly was lying perhaps to herself, too. Moth to a flame. She couldn't hold my stare though. If I hadn't been so emotionally wiped out, I probably would have avoided her eyes in sheer mortified embarrassment. Instead, I stared back, dull and frustrated, and she had to look away. I pulled my knees tighter against my chest, so small and vulnerable. We were all tiny, squishy, fragile little mammals compared to that thing which had seen me looking, that construct of pure mathematical principles. Even Rain seemed fragile right now, by comparison. An awful thing to feel. Rain had insisted I sit in the beanbag chair, the comfiest place in the whole flat, save for Kimberly's own bed. I wasn't so bad that I needed to lie down. After all, I hadn't actually gone through with the equation, not the whole way. Rain rubbed my shoulders, on her knees behind me, trying to massage the tension out of my stress-knotted muscles, and Tenny crouched nearby, an attentive dog to her wounded master. Her ropey black tentacles kept drifting down toward my head and face, touching my hair or brushing my cheek, concerned, confused. Sweet, yes, but getting on my nerves. I eased the closest tentacle away with one hand. Tenny, stop that for now, please. She tilted her head left and right, and her tentacles drifted up, toward the ceiling. Yes, quite, you don't understand what happened either, do you? At least you listen to me though. I gave her a smile, though I still wasn't certain if she could read human expressions. I'm fine, I'll be fine, I muttered to her. Kimberly stared at me again, wide-eyed at the empty air to which I'd spoken. She talks to invisible monsters sometimes, Twill informed her, with a very serious nod. I didn't have the energy to correct Twill before she continued with her theory. So, maybe it wasn't Lozzie here in the flat, but it was Lozzie you found? It sounded like her, I groaned again, and winced at the bruise on my face. The makeshift ice pack wasn't doing much good, and I tossed it onto the table in frustration. And I can dance like that too. So undoubtedly lousy, the exact phrasing she might use, her bright mind and playful expressiveness bent to alien purposes. It had been her voice, but she hadn't been the one speaking. "Why didn't you tell me what you were doing?" Rain asked with a softly indulgent laugh, her thumbs kneading the muscles of my shoulder blades. "Could have gotten Evie to help, back home, could have been ready for it." I shook my head and waved a dismissive hand. "Lozzie needs me." "She also needs you conscious and healthy, if you're gonna help her." "I know." I snapped at her, wallowed in guilt all over again. My impatience and self-loathing wasn't Rain's fault. She was the best antidote to it all. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry I'm being awful." "It's okay, I know how it feels," Rain said, so softly that only I could hear. At least that's one thing we shared completely. Was this how she felt about me, all the time? "I have to find her," I muttered, but all my certainty was gone. I could try the brain math again, but that thing would be waiting for me this time. The thought made me shudder inside. "We have to find her," Rain corrected gently. She stopped rubbing my shoulders and moved around to my side, so I couldn't avoid her gaze. She raised a hand to my chin and gently tilted it to examine my face. "Oh, that bruise is gonna be a nasty one, you really nut that table." "First class headbutt," Twill added with a nod. "Coulda knocked somebody out with that." "As if that helps anything right now," I muttered. "Heather," Rain said, her voice pitched low and serious, the kind of tone that made me sit up. "And pay attention. I'm going to ask you a hypothetical question, all right? Pure theory here, it's not a request or a suggestion. The brain math you just used, how you made contact with Lozzie or not Lozzie, do you think you could do it again?" "Yes," I answered, then hesitated. "But it fought me. With the math. The same thing I can do. I don't know if I can, if I'm good enough to, I don't know, fight back. I have no idea how that would even work. If I hadn't stopped, it would have reached me." Rain nodded slowly, her face etched with deep focus. I knew that look all too well. She was making a plan. I loved her for that, but I hated myself for wanting it. Rain cooking up a way to save the day, to save me, yet again. To save her useless girlfriend, again. Because I couldn't do it myself, because I was an unprepared coward, and a terrible friend. "I guess Lozzie wouldn't try to fight you, would she?" Twill asked. "Or is that something you two did?" "It's Lozzie because it tried to fight me," I said, patience running thin. It knew how to use hyperdimensional mathematics. I've never felt that before, anything like that. It must have learned from her mind. And it knew me, it recognized me, it was expecting me. It's her, it's got her, I mean. Everything she is. Twill shrugged. I remember what that bloody grade I felt like. She shook herself once, a theatrical shiver, but I didn't blame her. She'd been exposed, once, to the briefest moment of the eye's attention, filtered through Evelyn's magical observation window, across the boundary between here and outside, when we'd performed that ill-fated experiment in the medieval metaphysics room, so many months ago. Who's to say it couldn't send something here, with all its stuff, to get you, like? If it could do that, I think it would done a long time ago, Rain said for me. And why wander around Sherrowford, why come to Kim? Unless it was Lozzie, trying to say hi to an old friend. I was never her friend, Kimberly murmured. Please don't, I didn't, never did. Or setting a trap for me, I hissed. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Rain's voice dropped to a low growl. She stared at me with a kind of slow contemplation. If I'd been less bruised by brain math, the attention would have made me feel self-conscious. Heather, I want you to make me a promise. Now. Right now, yeah. Promise me you won't do that again. Don't try to find Lozzie a second time. But no, Rain, I can't. I have to dash. Rain put a finger to my lips. You have to do one thing, for me, be careful. Whatever this thing is, it wants you. It's not getting you. Promise me. I couldn't look at her. I didn't deserve to. Rain was giving me exactly what I wanted: a way out, a refuge, an excuse not to dive back in and confront that vast, slithering awareness I'd felt. Rain didn't need my promise. I knew she was right, and secretly I was terrified and disgusted on a level I couldn't process. I'd never had hyperdimensional mathematics turned on me before. I felt so violated and offended on Lozzie's behalf. That was her gift this thing was abusing, and I was powerless to take it back. Rain offered me a way out, and I felt like a coward. Please, Heather. You were taken by an outsider once, perhaps there's some desirable quality in you. She cracked a grin. Hey, I know that part's right. Worked on me. Rain. I muttered her name and rolled my eyes. It's hardly the time for that. It's always the time. I won't try again. I promise. A lump formed in my throat, and I sniffed back the threat of more tears. Coward, you useless coward, backing away from this. I doubt I'd win, anyway. I can't help her. Rain leaned back and took a deep breath, completely unembarrassed by our shared private moment. Twill was still frowning at me, but Kimberly had at least pretended to look away. I wouldn't say that yet, Rain almost purred, a twinkle in her eye. If we can't find Lozzie ourselves, we need to enlist somebody who already did. With deliberate slowness, Rain turned to regard Kimberly again. Me? What do you mean? Aw, Twill grinned, and underneath the table she stretched out one foot to poke Kimberly. The poor woman almost jumped out of her skin, flinching and jerking up. Steady on. "'S just playing, Twill said, hands up. Relax, damn. I am sorry. Sorry. Kimberly, I croaked. Stop apologizing. Yes, I'm S-. She stopped, swallowed, staring at us. So, Kim, Rain said, easy and relaxed as she leaned forward to put one elbow on the table, idly playing with an empty mug. You didn't think I'd forgotten in all the excitement, did you? Pardon. Where did you go? Where'd Amy Stack see you? Rain asked, then smirked. Kimberly froze up again, but only for a second. Perhaps the experience of seeing me do brain math, the awe and reverence I'd inspired, had some bizarre effect on how much she trusted us. Trusted me. Or maybe she'd merely decided our mercy was a better bet than Amy Stack. She'd be right, of course, but Rain's stare implied otherwise. Yeah, come on, what were you up to? Twill asked, a little too hard. Nothing bad, Kimberly blurted out. She squeezed her eyes shut and took a deep breath, reached for the stub of her reefer but then decided not to light up. She cradled her hands in her lap instead. I went back to the Wiccan Coven. That's all. But I shouldn't have. The what? Twill squinted. Wiccan Coven? Rain asked. Wicca. Right, I muttered. I should have guessed, considering the new agey pagan books lining Kimberly's shelf. I tried to keep my exasperated sigh to myself, told myself not to judge, but my reaction must have shown on my face, because Kimberly suddenly gave me a wounded look. Coven? Twill repeated. You mean like witches? Yes, like witches, Kimberly said, the hurt plain in her voice. Back to the coven? Rain asked. Hey. Twill pointed at Kimberly. I thought she said no more magic. I thought that was bloody point, you dash. It's not real magic, Twill, I said gently. Wicca's a New Age pagan revival movement. A religion. And not like yours. Oh. What, like the druid guys who go to Stonehenge? Rain smirked and nodded. Yeah, like druids. I know it's not real, Kimberly hissed. How can I believe in anything anymore? After everything? As she trailed off, eyes downcast, she seemed so small and lost, and in that moment I think I understood Kimberly a little better. I'd never really believed in anything much before I met Rain and Evelyn except the power of a good book. My parents weren't religious. Having faith is challenging when you believe your brain is broken, and you've spent half your short life terrified of the unimaginable monsters that nobody else can see. A merciful God would not curse me so. Kimberly had believed in something kooky, nature goddess something. Easy to scoff at, perhaps, but it had clearly been important to her. Meaningful. Comforting. Real. Then the Sherrowford cult had shown her the truth behind reality, and taken all that away. Kimberly, I didn't mean to insult you, I said. I apologize. Apology accepted, she muttered. You don't have to accept it. Why not tell me I'm rude? She blinked at me, as if this might be another rhetorical trap, and I hated that. I hated that I made this woman afraid. I smiled at her, best I could through the residual headache pain and the guilt. Why you're not, she managed. It's only fair. None of it was ever real. I don't even know why I went back, I just wanted some community again. Anything. Stack saw you going there? Rain asked. But not to work. Why? Because the coven is how I found the Brotherhood, Kimberly said. Because one of them must have told her I came back. Ah, Rain sighed. Now, I did wonder how a person ends up in the Sherrowford cult. Guess that's one way. Yes. Kimberly nodded. Beneath the hurt and the exhaustion and the fear of us, I saw a black smoky curl of real bitterness in her eyes. Tell us about this Wiccan coven then, Rain said. The truth, all of it. Because we need to find Stack. Wait, what, we do? Twill asked. Yes we do. Rain. I felt myself light up inside as I put the pieces together. I could have hugged her, but Rain stayed deadly serious, staring at Kimberly. We do, yeah, Rain nodded. Because she was here, at this flat, less than 24 hours after Lozzie. And from the sounds of it, Lozzie just popped in right outside Kim's door, yeah. If we find Stack, and I get my hands on her, then we discover how she knew Lozzie was here. And hey, if I get to Stack fast enough, maybe she won't be in any state to come back for you, Kim. So tell us the whole truth. You might get to live. Kimberly let out a shuddering breath and nodded. The coven, they're completely normal, except for one person, that's who you want, I swear. There's this shop off St. Helens Road, the Dash. Grey Magics, right? Rain asked. Why yes. How did you know that? Checked it out before. She looked to Twill and I, back when me and Evie first moved to Sherrowford. Had to make sure it was regular old occult stuff, not a front for the real thing. Full of stuff like this. She gestured at Kimberly's pentagram-stuffed bookcase, the crystals, the dragon statue, the wolf posters. It is, Kimberly agreed. Except for one person, the woman who leads the coven. Everyone else there is normal, I think, even the owner of the store. It's just where we meet. How's a nice girl like you end up casting spells? I joined a couple of years ago, and it was really nice, really nice. I never used to take any of this stuff seriously, I just liked the aesthetics, but I was going through, I needed people. And they were really welcoming. Really positive. So you did. What, rituals and stuff? Twill said. Kimberly nodded, earnest and open. Nothing scary at all. Candles, chanting. We had these little ceremonies for the lunar cycle, it was lovely. It was really good energy. And I got really into that side of it, the witchcraft. I thought I knew that none of it really worked, but I sort of wanted to believe, and it helped. I led a few circles, made sigils and stuff, for health and I made friends. One member, she was so sweet, her name was Hannah, she ended up in the hospital, pregnancy complications. I went to visit her and we did a spell together, for easy delivery and, I know it didn't do anything, but she pulled through. She had that baby, and it felt good too. Kimberly stopped herself, took a deep breath and blew it out slowly. This isn't what you want to hear. It's cool, Twill said. I get it. Rain grunted, nodding seriously. Kimberly gathered herself. The High Priestess, that's what you call a coven leader, an experienced witch. She's still there, Catherine Gillespie. She took an interest in me, took me under her wing. Told me I could go further, that I had a special knack. Kimberly's voice dropped, quiet and bitter. Told me she wanted to introduce me to some people. The Sherrowford cult, Rain said. Kimberly nodded. Their magic really worked, but it hurt. She glanced at Rain. The woman you killed in the castle, her name was Sarah Pants. She taught me well, taught as being a bit generous. She showed me. And then when it got too much, she forced me. Magic, I croaked, then swallowed to clear my throat. Real magic requires you to already be broken. Already exposed. That's the knack. How did you have that? Kimberly stared at me, shaking her head. I don't know. I saw a ghost once, when I was little. Does that count? Maybe the High Priestess, Rain suggested. Maybe one of those rituals was real, did something, maybe that's the point, using an overt Wiccan coven to find fresh meat. I was already broken. I know that much, Kimberly muttered, then realized we were staring and struggled to regain her composure. I mean, I was going through a bad time. I had a stalker, an ex-boyfriend. I wasn't well. I'm not well now, I know. Maybe that was enough, I said. I failed to sound comforting because I wasn't sure if I wanted to. Now that we discussed the Sherrowford cult once more, I couldn't shake the memory of what I'd seen in their castle, what Kimberly had been a part of, no matter how small or how unwilling. Had she really been pressured into doing magic because she had the talent, abused and used up? Or was this a sob story, an attempt to absolve herself of her involvement? Everything so far pointed to the former, that she was a victim too. Why couldn't I fully accept that? Because we were scary, and we had her in a corner. She'd tell us whatever we wanted to hear. This coven, they have a name? Rain asked. Kimberly nodded eagerly, climbed to her feet and went over to the bookcase. She returned with a cheap-looking pamphlet, little more than a few pages stapled together like a student magazine. She handed it to Rain and we all leaned over to see. The front cover sported a stylized design of a statuesque nature goddess, wearing wreaths of blossom, stood in the center of a pentagram made from living ivy. A title crested the top of the page, in a fanciful, flowery font. Shadow of the Moon, Introductory Workings for Any Sisterly Coven, by Catherine Gillespie. Twill wrinkled her nose. Crap name. What did you do? I asked. In the Sherrowford cult? My question caught Kimberly in a half-crouch, straightening up from handing Rain the little book. She stared at me for a second, as the question reached deep down inside her, how I'd intended it to. She stood up, but didn't seem to know what to do with her hands, letting them flop against her unicorn print pajama bottoms. But she did meet my eyes. I raised corpses from the dead, she said, a choke in her voice. You know that. Such a surreal phrase, in these surroundings, a cramped high-rise council flat in northern England, and even stranger to know it was the truth. I sighed without meaning to, at the never-ending parade of impossibility my life had become. Mostly homeless people, yes. I asked. I did know that already. What was I doing? I couldn't stop myself. Kimberly's face fell, slowly, as she tried desperately to keep it together. She nodded, but only halfway, an odd downward jerk of the chin. And what about those cages I saw? Cold fingers crept through my gut, and came out through my mouth. The dead children in the cages. Did you know about them as well? Kimberly didn't look up. She nodded again, and mouthed a word or two under her breath. Why was my heart racing? It made my headache so much worse. Why was I doing this? Surely Rain or Twill were about to interrupt. Rain was going to put a hand on my shoulder and get me to ease down, back off, let this go, because I was too weak from the brain math, too addled by my panic over Lozzie, and deep down I knew she'd be right. I was wound up and frustrated, displacing my helplessness, finding a person to blame for the very real crime I'd witnessed. I'd punished the man responsible, the head of the snake. I'd killed Alexander. Wasn't that enough? To my surprise, Rain stayed silent, watching me carefully, and Twill looked on with all the attentiveness of a wolf waiting for her pack's cue. I didn't quite catch that, I said. I know, Kimberly choked out. Did you know about the dead children? Kimberly. Did you? I know it's my fault. She shouted in my face the clearest and strongest thing she'd said since we'd broken into her flat. Then she coughed, her throat not up to the task as she fell apart again, eyes full of tears. I know. I should have taken a knife and stabbed them all, I know. I could have strangled Pants, or stabbed Alexander, something, anything. I would have died, but I should have put my body in the way. I should have helped Lozzie escape. Or gone to the police. They would have thrown me in the loony bin, but at least they might have saved a couple of those kids. I know I'm a coward. I should have died instead. I know. Kimberly's confession drained what little strength she had left. She sat down suddenly, almost a collapse, drew her thighs up to her chest, and wept behind the shield of her arms. Rain gave me a look, a sympathetic shrug which said it was my show, my choice, fair enough. Twill pulled a pained grimace, and silently mouthed, wow. I sat there blinking at Kimberly like the idiot I was. What had I expected? Her wet sobbing and collaborator's guilt didn't sound fake, but how could I know? An insidious voice whispered in the back of my head, of course there's a way to be sure. I could drag Kimberly back to the house, and have Evelyn interrogate her with magic. Evelyn was no stranger to that, she'd done it before, she'd probably agree with the idea. Or do it myself, threaten to send Kimberly outside and leave her there until she told the truth. That would be just as effective, because in the end it amounted to the same act, the same monstrosity. Torture. Lying or not, Kimberly was not very robust anymore, if she had ever been. She was a fragile young woman suffering a loud and messy kind of post-traumatic stress disorder, and there were no therapists who'd listen to her, not on this side of reality. If I wanted to believe she was lying, and I hurt her enough, she'd tell me anything I wanted. I cut that impulse off and dug out the root, disgusted with myself for considering it, even for a fleeting moment. My natural inclination to help this poor woman made me uncomfortable, because I couldn't know for sure what she'd done. I wished I had an authority to turn to, real adult to take this off my hands, absolve me of the responsibility. I thought back to what Evelyn had said to me, all those months ago, after I'd pulled her back from the underside of reality. There is no community of mages. There's just us. And right now I didn't have a clear mind or a clean heart, filled with guilt over Lozzie, and worse guilt over being useless, and I'd taken it out on Kimberly without knowing what I was fishing for. Maybe she was right, she was responsible, on some level. But her pain was real enough. I decided to believe her. You didn't deserve that, I said with a sigh at myself, the words oddly difficult to say. I'm sorry. Kimberly didn't respond at all. She kept crying into her knees, her thin frame shaking from the sobs. Rain gestured toward Kimberly with both hands, and raised her eyebrows at me in silent question. I nodded, embarrassed at what I'd caused. Rain was much better at this sort of thing than me. I should have left it to her from the start. Hey, Kim, Rain murmured, low and soft, the same voice she used with me sometimes. She crossed over toward Kimberly, knelt down, and reached out slowly. I'm gonna touch your shoulder, okay? Don't jump, it's only me. Kimberly flinched anyway, hard, the precursor to fleeing, but Rain quickly took her by both shoulders, gently rubbing her upper arms. I clamped down on a bizarre spark of jealousy, hardly appropriate right now. Kim, it's okay, it's alright, Rain purred. None of us think you're a criminal, none of us think you killed anybody. Yeah, Twill said. Me neither. Right. Rain gave Twill a slyly unimpressed look. Twill shut her mouth and cringed. Surviving alone was hard enough, Rain continued, her soft tone more important than the words themselves. And you managed that, you don't have to feel guilty. Heather's just very cautious. She saw more than us, most of the same things you probably did. We're not gonna use you up and then decide to get rid of you for something. That wasn't your fault. That's something I can promise, at the very least. Kimberly managed a jerky nod, still hiding her face. Her crying had dried up, except for the occasional sniff. Need a tissue? Twill asked, jumping to her feet. Here, there. She bounced off and back again, returning with a half-empty box of tissues, and slid them across the table. Slowly, carefully, Twill and Rain pried Kimberly back out of her shell. She blew her nose and wiped her puffy eyes, as Rain rubbed her back. The weeping seemed to have cleaned her soul, at least for the moment, changed her in a way I couldn't identify. When she risked eye contact with me again, she seemed empty, calm, waiting. I frowned when I realized why. I'm not going to pass judgment on you, I said, feeling vaguely disgusted. Don't look at me like that. For pity's sake, I'm, 5 or 6 years younger than you. How can you look at me like I'm going to decide your fate? Because you are, she ventured. Hey, only you decide your own fate around here, Rain said, cracking a smile. Quite right, I said. I'm not whatever you're looking for, Kimberly. Kimberly nodded to herself. She pulled more tissues from the box and blew her nose again. So, Kim, Rain said, gentler than earlier. This high priestess, this Gillespie woman, she's the one in contact with the Sherrowford cult. You're sure about that? Twill corrected before Kim could answer. We smashed them, right? Heather killed their boss and the rest of them are poof. Scattered. Amy Stack's still lurking about, Rain said. At the very least. And don't forget Lozzie's creepy uncle. He left the city. Twill said. People can come back into Sherrowford, you know. I said. Twill grumbled and shrugged. Yes, Kimberly said. Yes, Catherine Gillespie, she's the one who introduced me to the cult. Better get used to that word, Twill said. They call my lot a cult too. Don't suppose you'd happen to know where she lives, would you? Rain asked. Kimberly shook her head. Worth a shot. So, the sisterly coven, shadow of the moon, whatever they call themselves, when do they meet? Usually Saturday evenings, but also sometimes alternating Tuesdays. This Tuesday too, I think, Kimberly said. You're going to go there, aren't you? Rain's face split with a dangerous grin. Oh, goddess. Please, there's good people there, friends I had, normal people, they don't have anything to do with all this awfulness. Twill barked with laughter. What, you think we're gonna go in there and slash everyone up? That is what we did last time, I deadpanned. Yeah, but this is like, in public, in the middle of Sherrowford, Twill said. Not in some weird spooky fog world. That's it then, Kimberly said, her voice resigned and hollow. I've lost everything, haven't I? I've probably gone and lost my job by now as well. No more friends, no more coven, it's all gone. She put her face in her hands, but this time she didn't cry. She looked dead. We're not going to kill anybody, I said. We're not. Kimberly nodded, but I could see she didn't really believe me. Might be able to square things up at your job, Rain said. They already know me, I went round there and told them I was your mate. Here, Come on, you go back to work tomorrow morning, I'll come with you, have a little word with your boss. We'll figure something out. Say you've had awful flu and you've been delirious for days, and I found you asleep on the toilet, yeah? Kimberly shook her head. You won't be She shuddered at the look in Rain's eyes. Rain nodded slowly. When I say, have a little word with your boss, I mean I'll have a little word with your boss. Rain does have her uses, I said. Nice to have somebody like her on your side, isn't it? Kimberly swallowed. Oh, okay. Thank you, very much. Please don't hurt anybody though. I won't. Promise. But in return, you're going to do something for us, Rain said. Rain, I tooted, but she held up a hand. It's cool, nothing crazy. In fact, it'll let us find Stack easier, and the quicker we do, the better, yeah? Kimberly nodded, hesitant and afraid, her eyes seeking help from both me and Twill. This Catherine Gillespie, Mrs. High Priestess, Rain said. Do you think she'd recognize any of us three? I don't know, Kimberly frowned in thought. Maybe she'd know about Twill, but probably not yourself, or you, Heather. But maybe she does, I'm not sure, please don't rely on what I say. We can still work with that, oh yes we can indeed. Now, listen close, 'cause I've got a cunning plan. Why don't I like the sound of that? I asked. Oh, she's got a plan, has she? Twill said, grinning from ear to ear. I'm game, been a few weeks since I got some real exercise. Even Kimberly followed the undertones, and managed a shaky smile. You're gonna go to that Tuesday coven meet, Kim, Rain said, squeezing Kimberly's shoulder in a gesture that made me irrationally jealous. And you're gonna pretend to be Heather's new girlfriend. 2 days later, on an evening of clear black skies and frosty pavements, Rain pulled her car to a stop in the Foxenden Road multi-story car park, set the handbrake, killed the engine, and turned to Kimberly and I in the back seat. Was gonna ask if you two feel ready. Her grin was almost lost in the concrete gloom. Don't need to, do I? You look ready. As much as I'll ever be, I muttered. I wriggled my hands into the white leather gloves I'd borrowed from Evelyn, and tucked my scarf around my throat. Kimberly nodded and exhaled slowly and steadily. She didn't look too shaky in the dim orange light cast by the car park's overhead lamps. I suspected she had some cannabis in her bloodstream, but I didn't blame her one bit. Everything tonight rested on the strength of her nerves and her acting talent. She didn't need to hold it together for long, 2 hours from now this would all be over, one way or another. It'll be okay, she said. I'll be okay. Focus on the fun part, hey, said Rain. You get to hang out with some of your actual friends for a bit, right? The messy part, that's all me and Heather. You don't even have to stay and watch that part if you don't want to. That's very kind of you. But I'd rather not walk home by myself. Please. I cleared my throat and shot Rain a look. You won't have to. Sure, no problem, we'll give you a lift. Rain shrugged. I'll even walk you up to your flat, make sure there's nobody lurking about. Sounds cool. Yes. Yes, thank you. I treated Rain to another few seconds of my best glower. She just grinned at me, attractive and infuriating in equal measure. What Kimberly didn't know and what left me so irritated before we'd even begun the evening's absurd plan was that she wasn't going home tonight. She was coming back to number 12, Barnslow Drive whether she liked it or not. Supposedly half for her own safety, but also half because Evelyn had demanded they meet. I suspect Evie wanted to interrogate the poor woman herself. Rain had insisted we treat Kimberly's nerves with cotton wool, which meant lying to her, so as not to spoil our chances of pulling off this mad escapade. The deception tasted like rotten bile in my mouth. I had an entire paragraph-long apology to deliver, not to mention some choice criticism for my friends when we got home. I checked the contents of my pockets, purse, lip salve for the 5-minute walk through the biting cold, mobile phone for emergencies, personal attack alarm for bigger emergencies, and Rain's most recent present for me, a slender black palm-sized can of highly illegal pepper spray for absolute emergencies. "Wanna go over the plan one last time?" Rain asked. I shook my head. "It's not exactly difficult." "Kimberly." "I'm fine too." "You've got to sell the girlfriend angle," Rain said. "Stop High Priestess spooky smelling a rat. We've got to get her alone. She suspects anything, then I'll have to do this all in a much uglier way." "And how do you suggest we do that, Rain?" I asked. "Make out in front of the Wiccans? Dress in rainbow flags?" I'd heard all the reasoning, 3 times over, but I still huffed and crossed my arms. Kimberly swallowed, and I felt even more sorry for her. She was the one who'd have to fake a lesbian relationship in front of all her old friends and acquaintances. She hadn't raised a squeak of protest though. Privately I wondered if she'd made this about atonement. At least we were dressed the part. I'd played up the clean-cut student angle, a thick cream-colored polo neck borrowed from Evelyn under my coat, and a long skirt over a pair of burgundy tights. Rain had helped me choose, helped soften the nasty bruise around my eye with foundation and concealer, and helped me do my hair too, brushed it smooth and teased the ends up. A fake date night outfit, far beyond the usual limits of my courage, but this was for Lozzie's sake. Kimberly still looked deeply unhealthy, but she'd cleaned up well, her auburn hair twisted back and pinned up with a pair of chopsticks, the worst of her dark eye circles hidden with a little makeup, neat sky blue polish on her nails. Comfortable denim jeans drew attention upward, to her hips, and her showy t-shirt visible through her open coat, the front printed with a rearing unicorn locked in combat with a dragon. "Hold hands, stick close to each other, make eye contact," Rain said. "And Kim, introduce Heather as your girlfriend. That's all. Cece. Just don't make a move till you see me. I'll be right there the whole time, in case things get too weird. You won't be in any danger, either of you." "What if you can't get inside?" Kimberly asked. "I know you can pick locks, but..." "Then I'll text Heather, like I said. Anything doesn't go to plan, the smallest nut or bolt, then I text Heather, and suddenly you both have to leave because of family in hospital, or your car's been clamped, or one of you has the shits. Walk out without explanation if you have to. We'll be right there." She turned to the 4th member of our little team. "Ain't that right, Preem?" "We shall," Preem intoned from the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, hands folded in her lap. She'd peeled herself out of or been peeled out of her maid uniform, dumped unceremoniously into a pair of ugly cargo trousers and a big puffy coat. I did feel sorry for her, but one could hardly conduct occult espionage dressed like a domestic servant. "Bear with it for now, Preem," I said. "Won't take long." "Bearing," Preem replied, a musical lilt in her voice. "Evelyn says she is watching," Preem replied. "Have fun with Twill while we're all away, yeah." Rain winked at Preem, or more accurately she winked at Evelyn, watching through the doll demon's eyes via a paddling pool full of water in her magical workshop back home, while Twill kept her company and guarded the house. If we'd been doing something less mad, I would have rather enjoyed the thought of those two alone with each other for several hours. I did so hope Evelyn found her courage. "Stop wasting time," Preem said, and I could tell those weren't her words, the doll demon's musical tones warped by Evelyn's cadence. "Fashionably late is one thing, but really late is going to look suspicious. Shit or get off the pot." "Right you are, right you are." Rain laughed and rubbed her hands together, then leaned back over the seats and kissed me once, hard, on the forehead, and patted Kimberly's shoulder. "You won't see me, but I'll be right behind you." "I still can't believe this doesn't make you jealous," I said. Rain winked at me. "Break a leg." Sheltered from the worst of the cold by the close-leaning commercial buildings of the city center's edge, the 5-minute walk from the car park to St. Helens Road was still punishing in the January evening. We walked hand in hand through the pools of orange streetlight, without speaking. Kimberly's hand felt clammy and limp in mine, as she led me past closed sporting goods stores and office supply places. When we rounded a corner, I looked up, and caught a brief glimpse of Sherrowford Cathedral in the distance, the beautiful stonework lit from below, before we turned down a less used side road. Along the pavement and leaf-choked gutter, past a hole-in-the-wall sandwich place and a greasy little pawn shop, and there it stood on the last corner before a half-lit dingy residential street. Grey Magics, the shop sign read, in big jagged letters faded by the weather. I assumed the font was meant to resemble runes. It looked tacky. Besides the unfortunate sign, the exterior of the shop struck me as quite charming. The door was short, stout wood, with an iron knocker shaped like a lion's head. A bank of narrow, metal-latticed windows looked out on the street, overhung by oddly thick walls and glowing with soft light inside. A chalk signboard sat out the front, advertising, of all things, self-confidence, good energy, and love of nature. Each exclamation mark was written in a different color. Nothing gave the casual observer any idea of what the shop actually sold. Not the sort of place one wandered into without already knowing what one was in for. "This is it," Kimberly breathed. Her eyes darted up and down the darkened street as we stopped on the opposite pavement. I did my best to conceal my own nerves. The last thing the star of tonight's show needed was my second-hand jitters. "We're late, but that's fine. That's part of the plan. Everyone else must already be here." I was dash, she swallowed and sniffed. I wasn't looking for others. I was looking for Rain. Kimberly hadn't really led me here, of course, and she knew that too. Rain would never leave such an important factor to chance. We'd used Google Maps to check out the route, the layout of the surrounding streets, and even dug up a picture or two of the interior of Grey Magics, although I seriously doubted I'd remember any of the details in a crisis. For now though, I knew exactly what to expect, inside and out. No surprises. The last 48 hours had not been easy, not on anybody except Rain. She hadn't been able to suppress her relish at embarking on this kind of mischief, which for once didn't put me in explicit danger. I, on the other hand, had spent every spare minute since Sunday racking my brains for another way to find Lozzie. It wasn't that I didn't have faith in this plan, but I couldn't bear the waiting, the not knowing, the dwelling on what Lozzie might be going through as I pretended everything was normal, went to university classes, slept and ate and felt useless. Could we go back to the little park where she vanished outside? Could I somehow trace her from there? Did Evelyn have a way? Her answer was not encouraging. Maybe, perhaps, with the right tools, if. Could I somehow follow her trail outside, do it myself, alone, unprotected? That line of thought terminated last night, with me sobbing in the bathroom, the door locked behind me, as I tried to summon the courage. Rain had found me first, of course. Which part of Sunday's news got to Evelyn so badly, I was never really sure. She didn't care much for Lozzie, I knew that, but I trusted in the basic goodness of her heart, and I chose to believe at least part of her frantic attitude was born from care. She demanded to speak with Kimberly, ranted and raved about an outsider loose in Sherrowford, locked herself in her workshop for the whole of Sunday night and emerged again to interrogate me about Lozzie's behavior. She couldn't wait either, but neither did she have a solution. Espionage, I whispered to myself as I gathered my wits and prepared to cross the road. If only my mother could see me now. Kimberly attempted a smile. She was shaking. "Just remember what Rain said," I murmured, squeezing her hand. "Act like nothing's wrong." She nodded. Her eyes were unreadable dead pools of sterile blue ice. "I won't let you down. I promise." I did have some inkling of what she was bottling up, didn't I? I nodded toward Grey Magics, at the faux rustic building, and completely failed to make my point properly when I opened my stupid mouth. "You know, I'm pretty sure Evelyn Say believes in God." Okay. I sighed, both at myself, and at Kimberly's meek acceptance of my non sequitur. That didn't come out right. And it's not entirely accurate, either. I think Evelyn believes in God, on some level. She told me this complex metaphor once, for reality, about a castle, and how, well, a castle has to have a builder. I'm not saying she's Christian, that would be absurd, but she believes in something. Kimberly eyed me warily, so I forged on, trying to explain myself. I'd never really thought about it before, but considering everything people like us have seen, perhaps it's difficult to not believe in something, at least. What I'm trying to say is all that stuff, in there, I nodded toward gray magics. It's as valid as anything else. Perhaps you don't have to give up on it. Kimberly blinked several times and looked away. I don't know. I'm sorry. This probably isn't the best time to discuss that. No. No, it's okay. Maybe you're right. I don't know anymore. I wish I'd never found religion. I squeezed her hand again, and this time she squeezed back, no longer so limp. Nothing more to do out here, I said, my heart fluttering too hard in my chest. We were perfectly safe. Rain was nearby, and so was Preem. All we had to do was pretend for an hour or two, and then we'd have a talk with Catherine Gillespie. A little chat, that was all. The Wiccan Coven meet was technically called an Besbat, although I wasn't informed exactly what that word meant. It was also exactly what I expected it to be, and despite my best efforts it all felt quite silly indeed. 14 regulars were in attendance on this Tuesday evening, though apparently the coven proper was over double that size. This was only a bi-weekly extra, for those who had the time and inclination on a weeknight. I spotted a few faces I very vaguely recognized from campus, but not all the Wiccans were young impressionable hippie-adjacent women, not by a long shot. A trio of older ladies and one much older gentleman formed the emotional bedrock of the congregation, and they looked the part to absolute perfection. All long gray-haired faces crinkled from lifetimes of smiling, wearing pentagram pendants and comfortable cardigans, fanciful old tattoos on liver-spotted arms. They were already sitting and chatting in comfortable chairs toward the back of the store's floor space, in a nice large cleared area before a desk which obviously served as the shop's till while open, but was now covered with a white cloth and several ritual items: wooden bowls, a blunt knife, a silver mirror, lots of scented candles. The rest of the coven was a mixture of fresh-faced bright young things, and middle-aged women, though to my shameful surprise it wasn't all women. Why had I expected that? 3 other men were here, one a huge barrel-chested giant of a man with enough hair to drown an elephant, who was meditating quietly when we entered, sat on the floor with his eyes closed, legs crossed, hands balanced on his knees. 4 of the younger Wiccans in their 20s, Kimberly's old friends from before the cult got her, as I was about to discover, were wearing crowns of fake ivy, and despite myself I thought it looked sort of sweet, especially as they were the ones to perk up and greet Kimberly first. We'd barely gotten through the door and out of the cold, when we were suddenly surrounded by a storm of attention. Kim! You're back again. Oh, who's this with? You. Hello. Give us a hug, Kim. Here, don't be a stranger. Thought we'd lost you yet again when you weren't here Saturday. Can't stay away, eh? Yes. Kimberly managed a shaky smile, and gave the requested hug to a particularly plush-looking friend of hers. I can't stay away, you're very right there, yes. This is Heather. She held up my hand, still in hers, and her friends took her nervous awkwardness in their stride. She's my girlfriend. Oh, lovely to meet you, Heather. Yes. One of them clapped. Well done, Kim, about time you found somebody again. Is this your first visit? Another asked me. Have you ever been to a Wiccan Esbat or Sabbat before? You do look a bit nervy, it'll be fine, promise. You don't have to do anything. Oh, look at her, she's so cute. You're tiny. How tall are you? Not very. A terrible blush crept up my cheeks, though not for the reason Kimberly's friends assumed. For a split second Kimberly was not the liability, here I was, and I almost cracked. All I could do was smile and nod. But that's what I'd do if this situation was for real, wouldn't I? Brought on an awkward date, surrounded by kooky neopaganism, intimidated by a gaggle of older girls. I smiled, and I nodded. Heather, Kimberly continued, with a real smile on her face now as she indicated her friends one by one. This is Ginny, and this is Kate. The one who is about to hug you, that's Natalie, and last but not least, this is Spike. Spike. I stammered, already forgetting which names went with which faces. Unlikely I'd ever seen any of these people again after tonight. It's a nickname, Spike said, and the others all laughed. She didn't look much like a Spike, with long curly brown hair and big glasses. I smiled and nodded, and went with the flow. Come along you two, now you're here. It won't be long now, they're about to start, one of them said. We all wandered down the length of the shop together, past bookshelves and wooden racking, glass cases and display tables, all filled with glossy occult texts, fancy ritual tools, crystal balls, statuettes, robes, and all manner of pagan knickknacks. At one point a large orange cat got under our feet, purring loudly and looking for attention. One of the girls picked him up and carried him along with us. Over the next 10 minutes of settling down in a rough ring of chairs and stools in the cleared portion of the battered old store, I couldn't help but notice that Kimberly positively transformed as she spoke to her coven mates. She smiled without forcing her expression, sat up straighter, spoke without being spoken to, and not only to her old friends either. Almost everybody greeted her by name, and some asked if she was coming back for good this time. The much older gentleman in one of the comfortable chairs actually stood up and crossed the circle, and Kimberly all but bounced out of her seat to give him a friendly hug. Are you staying this time, Kemp? He asked her. We've all missed you dearly. You know that, don't you? I'm sorry, Jerry. I hope so, yes, I do hope so, she said after a moment, then turned to me. Heather, this is Gerald Hauer. He's been here the longest, and he owns the shop. Jerry, Heather. She's mine. Couldn't quite lie to the old man, could she? A surrogate father figure. Better than Alexander, at least. Oh. Welcome, you're very welcome. He nodded to me and beamed the sort of smile that only genuinely kind old men can. I hope you decide to come back too. Might be a bit spooky, your first time, but don't you worry. He gave me a broad wink. I'm quite good with spooky, I said, and smiled. At least in that, I could speak the truth. A middle-aged woman perhaps in her 50s, wearing a rough-spun green robe over her clothes stepped up behind the table with the white cloth and rung a tiny silver bell. All fell silent, and my heart climbed into my throat. She smiled at everyone present, open and welcoming, crow's feet in the corners of bright eyes, as she raised both hands. Loose dark hair fell about her shoulders, and she wore more makeup than most, heavy lashes and long false fingernails. I declare this SBAT, begun, said Catherine Gillespie. She didn't recognize my face, didn't know me, was none the wiser and didn't seem surprised to see Kimberly still alive and breathing. Or perhaps Gillespie had plenty of practice concealing her true feelings. I wasn't as singled out as I might have felt, because there were two other first-timers in attendance that night, a young woman about my age, and the 12-year-old granddaughter of another coven member. The little girl was certainly much more nervous than I, even though when this was over she'd be off home to bed, whereas I'd be staying behind to do things both illegal and cruel. The proceedings felt very silly to me, from the moment Gillespie led the group in a prayer, though they didn't call it a prayer, to beseech the goddess and God for help and comfort, love and support, all the way through the whole hour and a half of greetings, coven news, and then a great big ritual they organized in the middle of the floor. Chalk pentagrams with candles and lacquered wooden offering bowls at the corners, lots of chanting in flowery language, a blunt silver ritual knife and cups of spiced wine. Despite my assumptions, the high priestess didn't actually lead the ritual. That was left for the older gentleman, Gerald, who I gathered had been doing this sort of thing for a long time indeed. To my surprise, he invited Kimberly to help him. She lit up so much, waving around those bowls of rose-scented water. The ritual was a petition for aid, a magical working to encourage the good health and speedy recovery of one of us who cannot be here today, Gillespie said. One of Kimberly's friends leaned over to me and explained that one of the younger members of the coven was in the hospital. Leukemia. At least these people's hearts were in the right place. I was starting to understand why Kimberly valued this, no matter how silly it felt. Would my reaction have been any different this time last year? What I felt was not the mere embarrassed skepticism of a lifelong agnostic, or the usual polite British distaste for ostentatious displays of religion, but a much deeper absurdity, one which only emerged in full once the coven started their ritual. As they chalked their pentagrams on the floor, I couldn't help but compare this to the very real magecraft I'd witnessed over the last few months. The blood and pain, the eye-searing magic circles, the languages that were never meant to be spoken with human mouths. This was like children playing dress-up in adult clothes, and it made me uncomfortable and more than a little sad. I did my best to seem attentive and interested, sitting on the sidelines with the other observers, as I focused all my real attention on watching Catherine Gillespie. Twill hadn't liked that our target was named Catherine. SMY Mum's name, isn't it? That's just weird. Ugh, she'd complained. Maybe we put the wind-up her bad enough, she'll change it for you, Rain had said, elbowing Twill in the ribs. Gillespie didn't look like the sort of woman who would funnel vulnerable victims to the likes of Alexander Lilburn and the Sherrowford cult. An icy shard of doubt settled in my gut as I watched her smile at the other coven members, exchange encouraging words with her flock, counsel those who looked up to her. Her whole bearing radiated motherly kindness. Could this be a trap? Could Kimberly have lied to us? No, paranoia. Nothing more. My eyes flickered to the back of the Cramped, junk-packed store, to the two doors that led into the back, to where Rain likely now lurked. The ritual ended with an offering cake and wine lifted on a tray over the pentagram, dedicated to their deities, and then laid down on the table to be shared out among us mere mortals. The atmosphere descended into something more like a party than a religious gathering. It was utterly exhausting. I've never been a social butterfly, or even a social moth. Pretending to be Kimberly's girlfriend, and interested in Wicca, and keep track of Gillespie, and ready myself for the moment we put the plan into action. I felt ready to spin apart. One of Kimberly's friends pressed a cup of spiced wine into my hands. I pretended to sip, pretended to follow the chatter, gave answers that I forgot as soon as I'd said them. Had to keep my wits about me. Kimberly returned, all smiles, but faltered when she caught the look in my eyes. Heather. Yeah. I'll go have a word with her. I'll be right back. Right back. I watched Kimberly in the corner of my eye, pulse heavy in my throat, heart tight inside my ribcage, as she slipped back through the crowd to seek a private word with Gillespie. She found her high priestess and took her briefly to one side. I heard Kimberly's words inside my head, the ones we'd rehearsed. I brought Heather tonight because our mutual friends, they suggested to me that she should be introduced, through yourself. This was the fulcrum on which the plan turned. The entire reason for this absurd setup. We had to get Gillespie alone, but the problem was how. If she really was connected to the cult, she'd be cautious, and possibly paranoid of discovery. We needed her curious why had Kimberly come back again, who was this with her? But not spooked by the obvious, open threat of somebody like Rain turning up. I readied myself to break for the front door, for the plan to crumble, but Kimberly held her nerve. Gillespie glanced my way, and put a reassuring hand on Kimberly's shoulder, and nodded to herself. Kimberly made her way back over to me and took my hand for real, not just for appearance's sake. Her smile was frozen, her palm clammy. I squeezed, and she squeezed back. I watched for Gillespie to pull out a mobile phone or disappear into the back, but she did neither. Slowly, agonizingly, the gathering wound down. People began to dibble away into the night in ones and twos. Kimberly's friends asked if we would walk with them. We're going to stay, actually, Kimberly jumped in for me. Heather wants to ask Catherine about initiation. That earned me many approving noises and another hug, but it didn't help our cause. If even one person lingered with us, the plan was off. We were counting on Gillespie's assumed need for secrecy. Eventually, when there were only half a dozen people left inside Grey Magic's, Gillespie came to see me. Heather. Heather Morel, yes. Her voice was soft and slow. She greeted me with a big smile and an extended hand, which I shook. Dry and cool. Kim's told me a little about you, that you're very interested in us, in perhaps joining the coven. I'm delighted to hear that. We're open to all here. Have you enjoyed today? Yes, quite, I nodded, and looked at Kim. We both have. She smiled broadly again. I hear you're also, she paused, the air pregnant with unspoken meaning. Another coven member called to her from the door, interrupting us. Gillespie raised a hand to wave goodnight. Only two left to leave now, a pair of women talking over by the table. Gillespie turned back to me. I hear you're also interested in certain deeper mysteries, yes? Oh, yes. I tried to look awestruck and naive, widened my eyes, nodded eagerly, and hated it. Yes, yes indeed. Kimberly told me you might have ways. Oh damn it all, I wasn't pulling this off. I sounded like an extra from a bad Hammer horror movie, the sort Rain liked to laugh at. A young woman in a white dress about to be drained by a vampire. But it worked. Ways and means, yes, ways and means, Gillespie purred. Witchcraft can be a rewarding path, and there are others with so much more knowledge and wisdom than I. If you like, I can set up an introduction. Perhaps we should dash, Kimberly almost squeaked, then took a shaky breath. Talk about it somewhere. In private? A lovely idea, Kim, certainly. Gillespie turned to the two lingering coven members, told them she was going to speak with us about initiation, a sensitive, personal matter, individual to every aspiring witch. They bowed out, with much approval and serious promises to be here on the coming Saturday. The front door of Grey Magic's closed with a soft click. Gillespie went over to turn the latch. We do have much to discuss, girls, much to discuss. Shall we? We had her now. I tried not to shake with nervous tension. Gillespie ushered us into the store's back room, and I discovered that 21st century witches still need computers. It was far less fancy than the front of the shop, despite a pentagram on one wall and a fertility goddess mural on another. A compact office space with a dusty computer on an old desk, cardboard boxes full of excess stock on the floor and a single open doorway connected to a cramped, dark storage area. Our host settled herself into the old wooden office chair next to the desk, and gestured with a smile at a trio of plastic chairs opposite. Please, girls, please do sit down. Make yourselves comfortable. I can't offer you any tea in here, sadly, Jerry doesn't believe in kettles. She had her back to the open door to the storage area. Perfect. Was Rain ready? She needed to make her move now. I couldn't wait any longer. Couldn't wait any longer. For what? Oh. A shard of ice, a remnant of an old feeling, wormed its way into my chest. Tea, thank you, Kathy, Kimberly said, and half sat down before she realized I wasn't moving a muscle. She straightened back up, eyes glued on me, going white in the face. Kimberly, dear, whatever's the matter? Catherine asked, frowning gently. Now, I thought you were Dash. Do you know a man named Alexander Lilburn? I asked. The words came out low and easy. Not part of the plan, not at all. Gillespie blinked in polite surprise. So measured, so reasonable, so kind. She disgusted me on a level I hadn't time to process. She'd all but confessed her involvement with the cult already, and I seethed inside with a cold certainty I hadn't felt since I'd faced Alexander. No more delay, no more waiting, no more pretending. Yes, she said at length, then drew herself up straighter, gathering her confidence again. Yes, that name belongs to an old friend of mine, in fact, if you're referring to the same person. Do you happen to know Dash? When's the last time you saw him? I said. She frowned, and her mask finally began slipping, that slow motherly benevolence falling away. Who are you, exactly? The woman who killed him. Gillespie's face froze, but only for a second. She rose to her feet in a rush, thundering at us with an outraged frown. Who on earth are you? Kimberly, who is this girl? And don't be so absurd. Lilburn, killed by some, whatever you are. Behind her, a shadow detached itself from the doorway into the darkened storage area, rippling into the light with razor-sharp precision, every muscle held tight. Rain slipped toward Gillespie's back on silent feet, eyes glued to her target, matte black handgun held casually at her side. If I hadn't been so focused, that sight would have given me the shivers, and not in a bad way. With an effort of will, I resisted the urge to look. Kimberly failed, and her wide-eyed stare gave the game away. Gillespie turned, but Rain was faster. The high priestess found herself staring down the barrel of a gun. And a good evening to you, Rain said to her, face splitting with a grin. Now be nice, and sit yourself back down. What are you? What dash? Gillespie went white in the face. Preem stepped out of the back stockroom too, hands clasped, eyes staring at nothing. I let out a shuddering breath and realized how badly my knees were shaking. Kimberly backed away a couple of paces, swallowing loudly. We hadn't warned her about the handgun. Hey there you two, Rain said to us without taking her eyes off Gillespie. Took your time. We almost ran out of things to talk about, didn't we, Preem? Hey yourself, I managed to breathe. Who are you people? What is this? Gillespie asked. I thought I told you to sit down. Rain asked, smiling, all calm and casual. The next question you ask, I'll break your nose. That's a promise. Sit down. Gillespie sat down, slowly and carefully, eyes wide with terror, hands shaking as she grasped the chair's armrests. I would have felt sorry for her, if it wasn't for what came out of her mouth next. I'm no apostate, she cried out. I've not breathed a word to anybody, I've kept every secret, I swear. I've not spoken to the police, my husband, anybody. Nobody knows. Nobody. Knows about what? Rain asked, grinning. The. Answer her, I hissed. The supply agreement. The scum. Is it not enough? I can always find more, there's always more out there. Don't, please don't. Rain raised her eyebrows, feigning polite interest. Sounds like we got the right person. Yes. We have, I managed, staring at this unassuming woman. The Sherrowford cult supplier. Unfortunately for your future health prospects, we're not from the Sherrowford cult, Rain said to her. We're more like a wild card. About to get wild all over your face, if you don't tell us what we want to know. Gillespie frowned, and her panic drained away as quickly as it had mounted. She tugged her robe straight, and then to my utter amazement she stood up again, ignoring the handgun pointed right at her. Kimberly, she snapped. This is completely unacceptable. Your masters will hear of this behavior, I swear they will. No they won't, Kimberly said, voice filling with unaccustomed nervous confidence. Because they're all dead. Weren't you listening? Don't be so insulting. You expect me to believe Dash. You're not talking to her, Rain said, amused. You're talking to me. Sit down before you hurt yourself. Absolutely not. Who do you think you are, ordering me to do anything? Gillespie drew herself up and tried to look down on Rain, which didn't work, because she wasn't tall enough. If you're not with the Brotherhood, then you should know I have Alexander's personal protect Dash. Rain punched her in the nose. Gillespie sat down, sudden and hard, crying out in pain with one hand cradling her face. Ah, ah, ow, ah. Who do I think I am? Rain grinned. That counted as a question. Did warn you I'd break your nose. Fair's fair. Fair's fair, Preem echoed from the doorway. Gillespie stared at her for a second, wounded and shocked, bleeding down her face. Rain loomed over the high priestess. Look, Gil, can I call you Gil? Maybe you're not scared of the gun, maybe you think this is a toy or something. It's not, and I will shoot you in the head if you keep giving us shit. We've got plenty of other ways to find out what we want to know, you just happen to be the easiest. If you make it harder, we'll take the next easiest. Get me? Gillespie's eyes roved the room, as if searching for help. She settled on Kimberly and I. She'll do it, I said. Kimberly nodded, and did her part with commendable gusto, though I suspect she didn't need to act. She's shot people before, right in front of me. Please. Please give her a reason to. I hate you. Gillespie straightened up, slowly, gathering her dignity and poise again, and looked us all in the eye one by one, nose bleeding. You may address me as Catherine. What is it you want to know? Rain glanced at me. I was supposed to ask the question, that was the script, but I couldn't speak, gripped by a growing cold anger inside my chest. I hadn't even flinched when Rain had lashed out, I could only think about one thing. What had Gillespie meant by supply agreement and scum? I knew, didn't I? You have a way to contact the cult or what's left of them, since we tore them up. We know that, Rain said eventually. Kimberly came back to your Wicca happy hour, and you told your contact, because then she got hassled. Maybe you even know where they hang out these days, and you're gonna tell us. I have a contact who visits me, not the other way around. I have no way of reaching them outside of that, which I cannot predict, or direct. I don't know what it is you people want, but you're meddling in things you don't understand. Shut up, I hissed. Answer the questions. Gillespie scowled at me. Who's the contact? Rain demanded. Gillespie crossed her arms. Alexander Lilban cannot possibly be dead. Don't take me for some fool, I know how the world really works. Killed by some slip of a girl? Don't make me laugh, this is ridiculous. I shan't answer a single further question, and I shall call the police. She reached for the battered cordless phone on the desk, but Preem was there first, hand on the receiver. The dull demon stared into Gillespie's eyes, and the high priestess recoiled at what she saw there. What are dash? Rain sighed and leveled her handgun at Gillespie's head, an unimpressed smile on her face. I wasn't bluffing, you know. Don't make this difficult. What are you going to do, shoot me? Gillespie almost spat. Here, in the middle of the city. A dozen people will hear the gunshot, and you'll never get away with it. You children have absolutely no idea how the world works, how your coddled little lives are kept safe by people like me. You won't shoot, you can't possibly do it. Get that thing out of my face. Rain's tongue poked out of the corner of her mouth, and for a split second I thought I saw her finger tighten on the trigger, but that wasn't why we were here. She glanced at me, smiled sadly, and shrugged. I did say no killing, I muttered, cold creeping out of my chest and into my brain. Don't you worry, we came right prepared for that. Rain lowered her gun. Preem, hold her down. What? Gillespie swiveled in her chair. Rain dug a sock out of her jacket pocket, one that I knew was loaded with a bar of soap in the end. No, don't you dare. You dash. Stop, I said, barely able to get the word out. Preem, you too. Don't touch her. Heather. Rain raised her eyebrows. We talked about this. You don't have to watch us hit her. I shook my head, and took a step toward Gillespie. She scowled at me like she'd found me on the underside of her shoe. That's more like it, she muttered. What did you mean, when you said, scum? I asked. She blinked at me. I don't recall dash. She means me, Kimberly blurted out, voice blurred by bitterness and suffocated anger. People like me. I most certainly do not mean you, my dear. You're a valuable addition to the Brotherhood of the New Sun, aren't you? You found purpose, and acceptance, and something useful and important to do with your life. Answer the question, or I will do to you what I did to Alexander. My voice emerged with a shake, a strange, cold anger. It rushed through me, almost beyond my control. Don't be so sanctimonious, you know exactly what I mean. The Brotherhood does good work, necessary work. Have you seen the filth-filled tent villages growing like mushrooms by the motorway? There's no helping those people. They're all drug addicts and illegal immigrants. You saw my coven, this night, you saw the sorts of decent, vulnerable girls those animals prey on, and now you're blaming me for helping clear them off the streets. You funneled the homeless people to the cult. Rain nodded slowly. Makes sense. You look pretty non-threatening. Gillespie raised her chin. As I said, necessary work. Don't you dare look at me like that, none of you have the courage. I took another step toward her. I saw dead children. In a cage. She rolled her eyes and huffed. Don't be so absurd, you saw nothing of the sort. And where? Where exactly did you see this? You are play acting. Virtue signaling. Who do you expect to convince, here? I've changed my mind. You don't get to live. I moved before the others could react, before Rain could stop me, before the cold certainty abandoned me to doubt. It took only a split second, clarity and speed born of indignant rage. I reached out and grabbed Gillespie's wrist. Out. The equation, the one I knew so well, spun into place with a wrenching of my skull and a heaving in my guts. I grasped the dripping black levers of reality, and pulled hard. Gillespie vanished. I reeled away and almost fell over, clawing at the edge of the desk before Rain caught me. Blinking through stabbing headache, nose bleeding, I groped for the office's waste paper bin, into which I promptly vomited. Oh goddess, oh dash, Kimberly was panting. Rain helped me sit down on the floor, bin between my knees as I spat bile. I shook all over, half from the brain math and half from adrenaline. Rain passed me tissues from a packet to wipe my bloody nose, as she gently smoothed my hair out of my face. You okay? Heather? Breathe slowly, yeah. I croaked. Been better. She handed me an almost empty bottle of water, and I sipped the dregs to wash the taste of sick from my mouth. Gotta admit, Heather, I didn't see that one coming. Would a brought more water along if I'd known you were gonna do that. You were homeless once, I croaked. Sure. I just thought, we were meant to be bluffing. She looked over at the now empty chair with a rueful sigh. Kimberly walked over and touched the chair's arm, then stared at me. That's our lead gone then, Preem intoned, and I knew it was Evelyn speaking through her. We are bluffing, I grumbled, blew my bloody nose into a tissue, and squeezed my eyes shut. I can bring her back. The map. S'possible now. If she survives, Preem said. She'll be fine. As long as she closed her eyes on the way, I suppose. Rain raised an eyebrow at me, rubbing my back. You sent her somewhere specific, didn't you? I nodded. Place I slipped to as a teenager. Windowless metal halls, darkness, things moving. It's bad. Everywhere outside is bad. This won't kill her. Leave her there for 10 minutes, should be enough. Right. Rain nodded. Right you are then. We spent those 10 minutes going through the office, just in case, though the only thing we found was Gillespie's handbag, which contained nothing incriminating or out of the ordinary. Well, Rain did that, while I sat in a heap and tried not to be sick again, and Kimberly vibrated with terror and awe. "Time's up," Preem said, and it felt far too soon, but I nodded and closed my eyes. "Do you need to go touch the chair?" Rain asked. "No. I only need to concentrate. And this is going to hurt, come touch my head, please." In truth, the hyperdimensional mathematics was relatively simple, at least in theory. Now I had the map, the pathways, the vectors through which matter could pass. All I had to do was reverse the equation, but I'd never done it before. I wasn't 100% sure I could bring Catherine Gillespie back. I hadn't really been bluffing either, but I kept that to myself. Catherine Gillespie did not deserve to live. I knew I had no right to judge, certainly not to torture her by sending her outside, but I'd done it anyway. Alexander may have been the head of the snake, but by himself he would have been nothing. Dark Lords only exist in fantasy stories, real people need support networks. Alexander Lilburn had willing helpers, followers, people who turned a blind eye, others bribed or bought out for the price of their humanity, along with those who rationalized evil to themselves as Gillespie had done so openly, right to our faces. Slamming my mind back through the equation, clenching up hard on the roiling in my guts as I pieced it together with the map, I wasn't certain I even wanted to bring her back. Had I thrown away our only lead to Lozzie, in order to satisfy my righteous anger? I was turning into something I didn't like very much. I grunted, grit my teeth, endured a spike of pain battering through my forehead. I dragged the High Priestess back from outside, back to our reality. Then I vomited into the bin again, whining, my head throbbing. Gillespie had fared far worse. She was curled up in a ball on the floor, panting and shaking, cringing in on herself like a wounded insect. Perhaps she'd found a corner in which to wedge herself, out there. Her face had turned bone pale, eyes wide as saucers, makeup running from her tears. Strange sticky white dust covered her shoulder and one arm, where some outside creature had brushed against her, investigated this terrified fragile ape. She'd lost control of her bladder, too. Her eyes whirled between us, sanity hanging by a thread. "You deserve that," Kimberly hissed. Rain just rubbed my back, shaking her head, not even bothering to level her gun at the broken woman I'd brought back. "Can you speak?" I croaked, quashing my self-directed horror. I'd done this thing, now I had to make it worthwhile. For Lozzie. I can. Yes. Why yes. I'll tell you anything. Yes, why yes. Gillespie lurched to her feet, unsteady and shaking all over. Rain rose too and covered her with the gun, but there was no need. The High Priestess stared down at the sticky dust on her shoulder and arm, an empty 1,000-yard stare glassing over her eyes. Oh. Oh gee goddess. Where was that? Where, an illusion, no, that wasn't real, can't be real dash. Do you want to go back there? I asked. No. Please. Please no, not again. She scrabbled for her handbag on the desk. They gave me money, paid me well. Lots of money. I'll give dash. Her open purse spilled from her fingers as she tossed banknotes on the desk. I sighed. Tell us about the cult. Cult. The Brotherhood of the New Sun. Yes. Yes, I dash. She told us everything, most of it both useless and horrifying, about the supply line she'd established for the cult, luring vulnerable homeless people with promises of help or shelter. She babbled every secret she had in sheer animal desire to never, ever go back to the place I'd sent her. I'd broken this woman, tortured her, and while I managed to keep my expression neutral, self-disgust boiled inside me. She deserved it, part of me whispered, and it was right. But I still felt sick. The visits, that wasn't a lie. It's only once every few weeks, and never the same time. I can't lead you to them, I don't know where, please don't dash. Who visits you? Rain asked. Give us a name, or a description. Stack, Kimberly said. Amy Stack, yes, AS sort of thug, or something. I swear, I don't really know Dash. We know of her, Rain said with a nod. Keep going. She came here last week, and of course, I told her about Kimberly returning. She didn't care, though. She was asking after Alexander's younger sister, but I don't know anything about that either. I swear I'd never heard of the girl before. I do have an emergency phone number. I'm not supposed to ever call it, ever, only if the police catch wind of, yes, you know. For an emergency only. Write it down, Rain said. And it better be correct, or, she trailed off, with a meaningful head tilt toward me. Oh, of course, why yes. You can have the number, here, take it. Gillespie had to write it 3 times before she could control her shaking hands enough to form legible numbers. Rain tucked the slip of paper into her jacket. This isn't enough, I muttered. I swear, I don't have anything more to give. Please Dash. Hey, you heard the lady, Rain said. She's in charge here. She says it's not enough, it's not enough. That's not what I murmured, and trailed off. I'd meant this wasn't enough to justify what I'd done. A phone number, was that all? They had I know of a couple of places in the city where they did unsavory things. They might have retreated there. Gillespie said. She was blinking rapidly, her eyes wild and all over the place, racking her brains for any scraps that would save her hide. One was on that terrible council estate, in the condemned tower, Dash. In the corner of my vision, I saw the blood drain from Kimberly's face. Her mouth hung open in silent horror. Glasswick Tower? Rain asked. The cult have a hideout in Glasswick Tower? Yes, that's the name. Gillespie nodded, smiling and desperate, so very thankful. Glasswick Tower.